Hi everyone, and welcome to Deep Geek Live. Today we are talking about bastards in A Song of Ice and Fire. There are a lot of illegitimate children, so we're going to be working our way through a few of the key ones, and also having a think about what George R. R. Martin might be trying to tell us, trying to show us what kind of themes are coming out from the fact that this clearly is an important part of the world that he has created. First of all, what I always try to do is start off with a little bit of news about what's going on in the world of epic fantasy and science fiction. This time last week, I did slightly name check it, but I'll say it again this time. We had news of a new Lord of the Rings feature film, which is very exciting. It's going to be called The War of the Rohirim. And this is, again, this is going to be sort of set back before the Lord of the Rings. So this is about the early-ish days of Rohan and the Rohirrim and Helm Hammerhand, who's one of their great heroes. So we're going to hear that story, and it's going to be in an anime film. Now, this is interesting because of the rights issue. And you can glaze over a little bit when you get to rights, but I think that this has got one very important implication for us, which is we thought that Amazon had bought the rights to most things to do with Lord of the Rings. They certainly had bought the rights to the Second Age. We didn't know what else they had got, but now it appears that this is not Amazon who are behind this. This is Warner Brothers and New Line Cinema, who are the people who are behind the Lord of the Rings films back in the day. And what seems to be the case, we haven't got absolute confirmation of this, but what seems to be the case, hat tip to Fellowship of Fans on Twitter, by the way, is that there's the rights now are split not by you can cover this part of the world and you can cover that time period, but by TV and film. Amazon appear to now have the rights to be making TV shows, and if you go back over their early press releases about the Lord of the Rings TV show, they do talk about this going on for at least 5 seasons and then other TV shows, so they're clearly thinking of a number of TV shows, whereas Warner Brothers and New Line have the rights to make films. Now, I think this is good news. This means that we're going to be getting lots of content in Middle-earth. So will this create 2 different versions of the Lord of the Rings universe? It's possibly over time, but both will have the Tolkien estate of very, very, very strong on making sure that you do not go against Tolkien canon. When there are gaps, you can do things there, but you cannot go against Tolkien canon. So I think, certainly to start with, we're not going to see different things which overlap and have different interpretations. I suspect we're going to be seeing just lots of extra content which does have a different feel to it, but certainly doesn't go against what the other set of content does. So good news, I think. Second bit of good news is that there was a random tweet from Jeffrey Wright a couple of days ago. Jeffrey Wright plays Bernard in Westworld, and he just did a quick photo of a chair with his name on it that looked like it was on a Westworld set. We knew that they were going to be filming Westworld Season 4 soon. This looks like they're, if not in production, then certainly in pre-production. So I think we could expect that to be some point around this time next year, maybe a little bit later. That's also HBO as well as the House of the Dragon. So given the timings, they'll probably won't want to run those 2 things at the same time. So perhaps we'll have next year House of the Dragon on HBO, followed up by Westworld Season 4. So there's lots going on. Things are now starting to ramp up. We've got a lot of, over the next 12, 18 months, we've got a lot of things to look forward to. But today, we're very much, and by the way, if you hear any strange snorting sounds, Dan is downstairs today, hidden around the corner, Dan, my dog, and is being a little bit noisy sometimes. But today we are looking at A Song of Ice and Fire. As always, what I try and do, I give my patrons a chance over on Patreon to put their questions to me on this subject. So I've got a list of questions from them that I'm going to be working my way through. I'll try and pick up as much as I can from the chat as we're working through. And I think what we'll do is we'll sort of try and go through character by character and then try and draw this all together to figure out how this might all work. What is it that George R. R. Martin is trying to say to us through all of this? Reflective rambling. Yes, I am preemptively striking the please for a Dan cameo. If you could see quite how precarious my setup here is, then you'd know I do not wish to touch it right now. So I'm not going to be moving the camera. If Dan appears here, then you might see him. Otherwise, no. So keep your eyes out. Okay, so let's start with a couple of super chats before we went on air. Alhad Pareshtakar saying, "Hi Robert, thank you for your excellent content." Thank you. In sequence of events, when do you think Jon's parentage will be revealed to him and to the rest? And we'll do Jon, I think, first. So this helpfully segues into that. In terms of Jon's parentage, I think we will find out about it, or he will find out about it, roughly the same time in the books as he did on the show. Probably not exactly the same moment, as in a few minutes before the decisive battle kind of thing. That smacked of TV show sort of ramping up tension. But the chain of events almost certainly has to be once he's come back from the dead. He will then lead the attack on Winterfell. We'll go through that in just a moment, and will be declared Lord of Winterfell, King of the North, as a Stark, effectively, and then start some sort of, all the hints seem to be that he will start some sort of romance relationship with Daenerys. He would not start that, I'm pretty sure, if he thought that she was his aunt. So it was only partway through that I think that he will get that information. What I think the bits be a little extent to which other people start finding out about it. Jon certainly won't find out about it until then. Will other people, is the question. Is he going to be the first to be told? He was on the TV show, certainly, because who knew about it? Bran and Sam. If it's not Bran and Sam who have the information, but it may be Howland Reed or someone else like that, who will they tell first? Probably Jon, but I don't think it's guaranteed. So I think broadly the same kind of iteration of events that we had on the TV show. And Jack Hurst, super chat before we went on air, saying, "Hi Robert, how do you think they got the battles in season 8 so wrong after doing the Battle of the Bastards so right? It really was amazing TV." I will talk about the Battle of the Bastards in a moment, but I will just say this, for touching on season 8's battles specifically. I'm not reopening season 8. I've spoken about that many times, but a few months ago, I rewatched season 8 of Game of Thrones, and I mean, my views didn't really change on it, having rewatched it again after a break of a couple of years or so. But I was struck then, as now, by the fact that the battles still did look beautiful. If you take all of the plotting and everything out, if you looked at, say, episode 3, I know it was too dark, the Battle of Winterfell. If you watch it again now, they've sort of brightened it up a bit to make it a lot easier to see what's going on. But actually, the cinematography going on there was pretty epic. If you can almost see it still with the Dothraki riding off into the dark with their burning araks in the air, and then seeing them blinking out one after another. You can see the dragons fighting up above the cloud line in the moonlight. Some of the imagery was really good. So taking that purely as it stands, I think they still got the cinematography on the battles pretty good in season 8, I have to say. It's the other issues, plotting and pacing and things, that were the issue. Googly Woogly, hi there, saying, I'm just here for a minute or two. I'll catch the replay later. Have fun, and thanks for doing your thing. Well, you're very welcome, and thank you for letting me say Googly Woogly. Eric Harker, will Edric Storm make a reappearance in the story? Yes, I think he will. We'll get on to the bastards of Robert Baratheon, but a little bit later. But I'll say this: so Edric Storm and Gendry were sort of merged on the TV show. So you have these two different bastards. Edric Storm had that plot line about Melisandre and the leeches and all of that business. He has now been taken out of action, or taken out of the action, by Davos, and he's happily now safely over in Essos. So he, I think, will return. Maybe he'll only return at the very, very end, but I think he will return, because he is, frankly, and again, we'll come on to the details of this, but he's probably, after Stannis and Shireen, the person with the best claim to Storm's End after them. So I think he will come back in as a politically important character, if nothing else. Matt Martin, do you think Rhaegar annulled his old wedding, or do you think he pulled an Aegon the Unworthy? And there's a piece of scroll somewhere that he legitimized Jon. I mean, I think there's a third option, which is he had a second marriage. The Targaryens did do this. Several of them had more than one wife, so I think that's possible. The fact is that you have to look at the characters of this and to understand what was going on. Elia Martell was from Dawn. She didn't mind really if he had other if he had other lovers, because the Dornish are remarkably cool and relaxed about all of this stuff. So that was absolutely fine. Lyanna, I suspect, would have wanted to be married to him, and probably would have wanted some reassurances that he wasn't then going to go back and sleep with Elia. So the most likely, I think, is that he got that marriage, the first marriage, annulled, and then married Lyanna in secret in Dawn. So I think that is the most likely thing. But it's I think that him being born a bastard and then legitimized, I think, is the least likely of those options, personally. I think that's caught up on the chat. So let's go into questions from my patrons. Sylvia Galasso. So we're going to start talking about Jon and issues of legitimacy, bastardy, and stuff like that. So Sylvia Galasso saying, ciao, Robert, ciao. Whether Jon Snow is a Targaryen bastard or not, he definitely has the Starkish looks. He does. I was wondering if we have any other examples of Targaryens marrying people with Stark blood, and was curious to see who their children took after. Had Jon looked like Rhaegar, Ned's plans to hide his identity would have gone very badly. Yes, that's definitely true. I think this is one of those things where it's the sort of the internal story logic works, is that, yes, we can say, you know, it wouldn't have worked if Jon had Targaryen looks, but then Ned wouldn't have gone with that plan if Jon looked like a Targaryen. Ned probably thought of the plan or went along with the plan because Jon looked like a Stark. So I think in the internal plot logic definitely still works there. In terms of Targaryens marrying Starks, we don't have any Stark Targaryen marriages. There was a promise of one, but that never happened. So we don't know exactly what that would look like. What we do have is quite a lot of Targaryens marrying other people. And there, seems quite hit and miss. A lot of the Targaryens, obviously, if you get down to where we're at in the family tree at the moment, you had Viserys and Daenerys look very Targaryen-y, very Valyrian, despite the fact that actually, if you go into the technicalities of it, Dany is probably only about still an 8th Targaryen. There's a lot of Blackwood heritage going on there. So the Valyrian looks do seem quite strong, but then if you go over to, say, the Baratheons, Robert Baratheon, his grandmother was a Targaryen, but he clearly doesn't look anything like a Targaryen. Neither do any of those children. So, no, him or his 2 brothers. So we shouldn't, I think we shouldn't read too much into it. It's that Jon could have looked a bit like his mother or a bit like his father. Turns out he looked more like his mother than his father. Kai Johnson saying, what was Ned Stark's ultimate plan for Jon Snow? If he didn't join the Night's Watch, would Ned in any event have tried to place him on the Iron Throne? I don't think so. I think his plan was dictated to by the promises that he made. And promises is plural. He didn't just make a promise to Lyanna, he made promises. Now, I think the first one is to protect Jon, to make sure he doesn't die. I think that adopting him might well be part of it. Ned thinks of broken promises, and I know lots of people have speculated about what that might be, whether they're his. I think the clear implication of the text is that Ned does think that he has broken a promise, and I wonder whether the broken promise is what seems a very, very natural thing for a mother to say in that situation, for Lyanna to say to Ned, protect my baby, make sure that he doesn't get killed. When it's safe, tell him who his mother and father were. That last bit, I think it just seems so in character, and I would have been shocked if she hadn't said something like that. So I think that is the promise that Ned broke. And I think that they had it sort of right on the TV show when they had, it wasn't like that in the books, but they had that moment with Kit Harington and Sean Bean when, you know, they're parting for the last time and Ned goes, you know, when I next see you, I'll tell you about your mother. And that, I think, is very much capturing the feel of what we've got going on here. So was it his plan to put him into the Night's Watch? No, that clearly seems to have come out. It's in the first few chapters when the idea of Jon going to the Wall comes up. That clearly wasn't Ned's original plan, so he had to think about it for a bit. I do suspect, given Ned's character, he probably hasn't thought about this in any kind of political level or anything like that. I suspect he just thought, I'm going to raise this child as my own. I'm going to protect this child from Robert Baratheon. And at some point, I will tell this child what their true identity is and trust that they will do the right thing with that information. And I think that is probably the limit of where Ned's thoughts or plans were. I don't think there's any hint whatsoever that he was plotting some idea of eventually placing him on the throne or something like that. No, that's not even his very absolute closest advisors had any clue of this, and he would probably have started planting the seed at some point. He didn't want anything to do with politics south of the neck. Ryan Larkin, thank you so much for the super stick. I think that's a cup of tea you've got going on there. Heartily approve. Flaming on my chest 1234, thank you for the super chat. I didn't see a question attached to that one. Perhaps one of my moderators, if you pop it in. Oh yeah, I see it now. Do you think Ramsay will kill his father in the books? I'll get onto this because I think there's a lot that sort of leads up to this. I think he may. I don't think it's going to be as clear cut as it was on the show. I think on the show they were building up Ramsay to be this big baddie, and basically they that moment has already passed of the show when he could have killed him. So we're now at a slightly different moment in the story where I think that Ramsay will realize that just killing his father then and there, while they're trying to defend Winterfell against attack, is probably not the best approach. But I think he might end up killing him anyway, in a way that I'll mention when I get to a question on that from my patrons. Nate Phipps, why did Ned agree to send Jon to the Wall after his promise to Lyanna? Sending Jon to the Wall seemed to betray that promise, since it's an awful life. Well, I think that the promise was to protect him, and because I think that's what Lyanna would have said. You know, she's only got a short while. What does she want? She wants her son to be protected from Robert Baratheon. Now, there is one Targaryen in Westeros who had been completely untouched by Robert Baratheon, who was at the Wall. So actually, it probably felt like the safest place to go. In terms of the sort of telling him about his identity, again, this kind of makes sense. Once he has disavowed any titles, any names, any inheritances, that is a time when you could tell him. And Ned, it's just a sort of a throwaway line in the book, but Ned says, I want to talk to Benjen. There's a sort of Benjen and Ned don't get on as well in the books. There's clearly a tension and a history there. We know what that is. But he says, after deciding, yes, Jon will go to the Wall, he says, and I need to have a word in private with Benjen. Clearly, this is the sort of the handover. Okay, now it's on you. Now you're the person who has the role to tell Jon who he is when the time is right. And we get hints of that with Benjen, and he sort of says, I'll talk to you when he goes off and is ranging before Jon. This is all before Jon has made his Night's Watch vow. Benjen says, when I come back, you'll be a member of the Night's Watch, then we'll talk. That is, I think, very clearly a follow-on from what Ned has sort of handed him over to Benjen's protection. So no betraying of a promise there, I think. But when, just to sort of round that one off, I should probably just say, when Ned starts to think of broken promises, it's because he has heard news that Benjen is probably dead. And Jon is at the Wall, and he is probably going to die. And that's the point at which he goes, actually, now there's no one left. There's no one to fulfill that promise. He will never know who he is, who his parents were. So that is the moment at which he starts getting regrets. Until that point, he doesn't really have regrets. Roman Lakovets, hopefully this one is at least somewhat on topic. I'm sure it will be. Do you think that Arya and Gendry are supposed to be a what-if version of Lyanna and Robert? Oh, interesting question. Well, they're a lot younger to start with. Gendry does look very Baratheon, to the extent that Brienne, when she randomly meets him at the end of the crossroads, sort of does a double take because he looks just like a young Renly. And so Arya, we're told, looks very like Lyanna. So George R. R. Martin he's trying to put that thought into our minds in a way that it might work. Will they? I mean, they were both very young, particularly Arya, when they were hanging out together in the books. But there clearly was a connection, a bond of some kind between the two. So George R. R. Martin is wanting to put the thought into our minds. But it's too soon at the moment to say this is a what if. It's just to show that these two people could get on. But Robert Baratheon is so different. If you think about those three brothers, the Baratheon brothers, they are so different. Would Lyanna have got on with either of the other two? Well, perhaps not. But, you know, Gendry, again, is a different character once more. Kai Johnson saying, thanks, Robert. How could Ned deny Renly the throne in King's Landing based on honour if he knew full well that Jon was the true and rightful heir? Well, I think if you're going down the the route of true and rightful heir, Ned did take part in what was an active and successful rebellion against the Targaryen succession. There's no getting around that. He was there. He supported Robert Baratheon in overthrowing the Targaryens. So the Targaryens are no longer, from the perspective of Ned and Robert and all the other people, the Targaryens are no longer the rightful kings, rulers of the Seven Kingdoms. So you've started a new dynasty now, Robert Baratheon. And after that, so Renly, he can refuse Renly being in charge because Stannis is next in line from his own perspective. And Ned is very clear that Stannis is the next rightful king. So this is all a matter of perspective. There is no absolute clear, everybody in the entire world accepts that the rightful king is such and such. That's not how George R. Martin works. There are some people who say, well, that was an illegitimate rebellion. The Targaryens were the rightful rulers, therefore we should figure out who is the rightful Targaryen to be ruling. You could go even further back and say, well, by what right did Aegon the Conqueror and his sisters come in? They're not the rightful rulers. They came in and killed lots of people until they admitted defeat. So it's just a matter of perspective. And from Ned's perspective, he took part in a successful and rightful rebellion against a very corrupt and in many ways evil and wrong regime. Aerys II did some horrific things, overthrew that new rightful ruler, and therefore, actually, in his mind, Jon probably is not therefore the rightful ruler anymore. The Baratheons are. That would not obviously stop some people from saying that Jon is the rightful ruler. Morgan Holmes, do you think Nettles is the great grandmother of Missandei or Grey Worm? So Nettles is she's the Dragon Seed Dragon Rider who rode Sheepstealer. Do I think that she's the great grandmother of Missandei or Grey Worm? No, I don't. I think Missandei is Missandei of Narth, and Grey Worm is from the Unsullied, so other continents. Nettles is, as far as we know, she lived out the rest of her days in the Vale, in the Mountains of the Moon. So no, I don't think there's any link there at all. Wagner Jimenez, thank you for your work. Greetings from Costa Rica. Wow, Costa Rica. Hi to you there. And Plum Kettle, saying, hi, Robert, your Patreon is a delight. Oh, that's the kind of feedback I like. Thank you very much. I fall asleep to your dulcet tones. Everyone join if you can. Well, that's thank you very much. That saves me from doing the advertising myself. But if you are interested, the best way to support this channel is Patreon. There's a link down in the description. I don't know if I put the description in if you're watching live, but I'm sure if you're watching live, it'll be in the chat. If you're not watching live, you're watching later, then it'll be down in the description. But thank you very much, Plum Kettle, and welcome to Patreon. I put all of my audio on there, all of the videos that I produce. I put the audio onto Patreon as an RSS feed, so you can listen to them at your leisure. Ryan Gormley, hi Robert, love your work, you're a legend. Is it possible Jon is older? Thank you very much. Is it possible Jon is older than Robb? Not sure from the text, but it seems very close. Yes, it is very close. So it's never made 100% clear, but the suggestion is that Jon is a bit older than Robb by a matter of a few months. George R. R. Martin has very deliberately, he said that he's very deliberately been vague about exact dates during Robert's rebellion because, you know, you can make mistakes. And frankly, at the time, they didn't keep such accurate records, so he wants it to be slightly vague. But yes, the hint is that Jon is a little bit, a few weeks, a couple of months or so older than Robb. But as far as the world's concerned, actually the age doesn't matter, because as far as the world's concerned, Jon is a bastard and Robb is the heir. Robb is presumed to be older, but that's not necessarily the case. Devyani, off topic, but who are your favourite audiobook narrators? I would love to get your opinion. So grateful to be part of your Patreon community. Well, this is great advertising for Patreon. Thank you very much. In terms of favourite audiobook narrators, I love Harry Lloyd. I've said this several times. If you want the perfect marriage of narrator and story, then Harry Lloyd doing the Tales of Dunk and Egg is amazing. He just absolutely nails it. Harry Lloyd was there. He was Viserys on the TV show, and so he has that kind of arrogant, which he uses for some of the Targaryens we have in there, but also he gets the tone of voice for Dunk just right. I love it to bits. Other people that I also really enjoy, I can remember a long time ago I listened to Jonathan Strange and Dr. Norrell, which is an amazing book if you ever get the chance to read it. The audiobook, again, I cannot remember who narrated that one, but whoever they were, again, perfectly captured it. And I have been listening to the Book of Unfinished Tales by Tolkien as well, and there's a father and son, again their name's West, I think their surname, their names escape me, a father and son team who are narrating as the father and son of J.R.R. Tolkien and Christopher Tolkien, with the text and then the editorial commentary on the side. It works brilliantly. So those are a few that I do very much like. Carolina Blues, thank you for your insights. What's your thoughts on Tyrion's choice of bastard name, Hugo Hill? This is for Carrie Bird. Thank you very much if you're picking this up for someone else. I love it when people do that. So Hill is the bastard name for someone born in the Westlands. So that's where Tyrion would have immediately thought that's what a bastard name is. He grew up in the Westlands. This is where Casterly Rock is. In terms of Hugo Hill, I mean, I think it's a good name. I have a feeling there probably is at the back of my mind. This is one of those things, most times there's something which sort of escapes my mind. There's something that sort of links it across, but I will have a look into it and come back to it. But yeah, it's a name that works for him as a simple name of a bastard from where he was growing up. A username redacted, a good username, saying any underlying importance of bastards in lore or to George. Several hold massive sway over the plot. Jon suspected Cersei's kids, Bloodraven, etc. Yeah, we're going to try and unpack this all the way through this. What is it that's going on? And I want to plant the thought straight away that the bastards that are there, can we actually see any difference in character of person between this huge amount of bastards there are and this huge amount of non-bastards that there are? For a lot of your sort of alluding, I think, to the fact that you can, or you may not be, but this is definitely there in the background to this, is that in a lot of the world at that time, and also in a lot of cultures around the world, then being illegitimate is seen as a bad thing, a taint or something like that. And I just wonder whether George R. R. Martin is giving us not just one or two random examples so that we can say, look, he's subverting the trope of bastards being bad by having a good person as a bastard, or he's giving into it by having a bad person. I think he's showing us lots to show us that it doesn't make a difference. Humans are humans. It doesn't matter what the marital status of your parents are. Humans are humans, and there's a variety of people, regardless of what their parents, who their parents were, or what they are. You can be good, bad, evil, somewhere in between. question from, I had one more in the chat. Yep, here we go. So Robin Ludwig Isama. Robin, I think I got a question from you a bit later. I think I saw you say it was your birthday today, in which case, happy birthday. I hope you're having a fantastic day. Do you think we'll hear any more about Tyrion Tanner? Again, this was scratching my head. I don't think so. No, I think this is one of the what George R. R. Martin does is have a huge amount of characters, and this is one thing I love about him. We all know he's got a huge amount of characters, and he doesn't just do that to look impressive and to have a complicated plot. He does that to have a well-rounded world. So not everybody that we're introduced to is central to the plot. So we have a lot of characters who aren't, and that is right. So I think this is something that falls under there, and a lot of the characters fall under this kind of banner of people who aren't central, but they needed to be there. They are Tolkien, I think, put it as being not plot important, but world important or creation important. So that's, I think, where we're at with a lot of these extra characters. Question from Lady Dane saying, I am a bit peeved that Jon, the good bastard, will be proved to be legitimate. Yes, I want him to have a loving mother and father, but I would also like the view that bastards are tainted to be overthrown. Ramsay is the perfect example of a bad bastard, even though he fits his family's paradigm. Will there be any relatively large or well-publicized news of a bastard making a positive contribution for the good of all? Yeah, so I think I'll take this on the angle that you were going there, which I think is a really interesting example, which is that bastards, one of the things George R. R. Martin does show is that bastards do take after their parents, or at least who they're raised by, regardless. So Ramsay, he fits in. He wasn't, when he was very young, he wasn't raised by Roose, but then he sort of does seem to have a lot of Roose's characteristics, and he certainly embraced the Bolton part of his personality. Jon, we see it again and again, is the character probably most like Ned, which is sort of ironic given the fact, other than maybe Robb, most ironic given the fact that he's not actually Ned's son. So George R. R. Martin is showing us the value of who you are raised by, the atmosphere in which you are raised, as much as being more important, really, than your parents' marital status. So you're saying, will there be any well-publicized bastards making a positive contribution for the good of all? I don't think George R. R. Martin is working that story. I don't think he is trying to subvert this by saying, here's a wonderful bastard who's amazing, and everyone must love them. I think we will end up with a number of characters. I think Gendry is a good character. I think he will end up being someone that we point out and go, yeah, he's one of the good guys. He doesn't even know that he's of his heritage at this point in the story, but he's joining up with the Brotherhood without banners when they're being all sort of righteous and trying to do good things. He's helping out to support them. He's doing good things at the inn at the crossroads selflessly. He is very much in this role of being a good person who just happens to be a bastard, but he just doesn't know it. And Jon, he is a good person. And whether he ends up being technically a bastard or technically not a bastard, I think George R. R. Martin, his view is that it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all. And there will be debated, and I suspect we may even get to the point where we still don't know, right at the very end of the story, 100% whether they were married and whether he was fully legitimate. That's not the important part of the story there. Sebastian Holden, is Aegon IV the most important Targaryen king of all time? His bastards have a big impact in the past and present story. They are key in helping save Westeros from the others. Your thoughts? He was, so Aegon IV was a king, so after Fire and Blood, but pardon me, obviously before Aegon V, so he was Aegon V's grandfather, I think. He was a very good and strong king, but he had a huge amount of children, and his bastard children were all very important and influential. We get Daemon Blackfire, we get Bloodraven, Shira Seastar, Aegor Rivers. I think this puts him into the role of important, which is what you have there. In the same way that you sort of say that Jaehaerys was important, that Aegon I was important. There are a lot who are important, but important because of his offspring as much as anything else. Now, you say they're key in helping save Westeros from the others. I mean, Aegor Rivers and Daemon Blackfire were fighting to claim the crown. I think the two who are, well, one we know about Bloodraven. I certainly think that Shira Seastar is probably Quaithe. They are both definitely trying to help save humanity against the others. So yes, that's there. Does it make him important? Influential, perhaps, is a better way of saying it, because of the amount of important people who came from him. Maura Lee, two things I enjoy as a patron is being able to ask questions for live streams and listening to Robert read the pre-release chapters from The Winds of Winter. Yes, they are. If you guys, thank you so much for. I'm very bad at self-promotion, but yes, reminding me of things that I can say. The pre-release chapters from The Winds of Winter, if you're interested in them, I have recorded them, done audio narrations of all of them, and you can find them in my Patreon. So if you join as a patron, then you can get access to them. Saying thank you, Robert, for all the fabulous extra content you provide for patrons. You're very welcome, Amara. Thank you very much for your support ongoing. I hugely appreciate it. Isaac Husson, Dany shows no sign to the Westerosi of invading. Would Targ loyalists support an open Blackfire? Also, since it's Pride, have you read or watched Jojo? I have not, but happy Pride month to everyone. In terms of the Targ loyalists supporting an open Blackfire, I mean, I don't think so. The fact is there aren't many Targ loyalists left. That's and most people don't care. Jorah had it right when he's saying, look, frankly, most of the small folk don't really care who rules. What they care about is the weather and the seasons and the tilling and of the ground and things along all the rest of it. That is what they care about. They don't care about who the actual lord is, as long as they're not being, cruel or at war or anything along those lines. So it's the houses, the noble houses, that are the issue. How many of them are still Targ loyalists? Not many, I would argue, and because how many would? The North, they don't really care about the Targaryens. The Iron Islands don't really care. You wouldn't call the Westlands Targ loyalists in any way. The Vale, the Riverlands, I mean, there are a few there. Cracklaw Point, definitely some Targaryen loyalists there. There are a few dotted around sort of the Reach of the Riverlands. And Dorne, we all know Doran's master plan is just to marry his children to Targaryens. So they could be, but it's not like an overwhelming, huge amount of people crying out for the Targaryens to come back. So it's just a matter of how you dress up your candidate to get the most support. And if you can dress up your candidate, Vagon in this case, as being a Targaryen, that probably gets you more than them being a Blackfire, because the Blackfires were never fully recognized on the throne, so whereas the Targaryens were. So it's better to be appearing to be a Targaryen than appearing to be a Blackfire. I think that's me caught up in the chat. Matteo Dominique just in the chat I spotted saying almost 1 hour through, I guess it's time for some mod love. Yeah, so moderators old and new, the old mods on the new, thank you. You do an amazing job. Learned it anew, even though I knew it before. A couple of weeks ago when we had all of that, the spam bot attack. You do fantastic work, so thank you very much. I hugely appreciate it, and I know everyone who watches these live and participates in the live chat also appreciates it. So if you are watching live, could you please just give a little bit of love to the moderators? I would hugely appreciate that. Question from Launduck20. Hello, Robert. Rob's will supposedly legitimizes Jon, so if it resurfaces, will he actually be known as Jon Stark from then on, or will he reject the name like when Stannis attempted to legitimize him and Stair Snow? Also, do you believe Littlefinger's story about Robert's twin bastards born in Casterly Rock that were killed on Cersei's orders? I find it hard to believe this never made it back to Robert, considering how gossip spreads. Well, I'll answer the first part of that first, about Rob's will legitimizing Jon. Well, we don't know the exact words or anything like that. If you want a sort of a legal-ish discussion about that, a long time ago, I had on the Westerosi Bar Association here on the channel, and we were talking through a few legal issues in Westeros, and one of the ones that we talked through was the matter of the will. And when you get into it, so much of it depends on the exact wording. But as a sort of a high-level comment on this, you can only be legitimized by a king. Rob was a king. If Rob in his will legitimizes Jon, then yes, that makes him a Stark. So he would then be Jon Stark. It's not then a matter of when Stannis was saying, "I'm king, I can legitimize you and make you Jon Stark," it's the recognized king of the North is doing it, and when it's his brother, it will add a bit of extra gravitas. But I suspect that on the show, you remember how Jon was sort of made king of the North by kind of popular acclamation. I have a feeling it's going to be a bit like that for Jon in the books. Not exactly like that, but I suspect that the situation is going to be, who do we make? We need a Stark to be king of Winterfell, king of the North. Who is it going to be? Let's say they've got rid of the Boltons. They're now sat in Winterfell. They want a new king of the North. Well, the person that they thought was Arya, to work our way through the Starks, the person they thought was Arya isn't actually Arya. So that Stark is gone. Sansa may well have appeared, but obviously she's female, and technically, in many people's eyes, she married a Lannister, therefore she probably can't be trusted. Littlefinger may well want to put her there on the throne, but a lot of people probably won't want that. Rickon will have been brought forward by the Manderleys, but I suspect that Rickon will die. Bran will still be missing. So who is the only candidate you've got left? Jon. I think by popular acclamation, they will make him. And in the same way that he became Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, we could call it foreshadowing if you like, in the same way that he just sort of like comes in and goes, "Oh, you're now in charge." That's what it's going to be like. He doesn't try and gather power to himself. Power is thrust upon him. And this is going to build up to this point when, does he want to be king? He doesn't want to be king either. But people will try and make him king. So that is where we're going with Jon. Yes, I think he's going to be a Stark, so he will officially be Jon Stark. Then he may well technically be Jon Targaryen later on, called that by some people at least. The name that we should not be surprised by this. Almost all of the characters, the main characters in A Song of Ice and Fire, go through name changes. Arya gets lots of different names. Sansa's currently pretending to be Elaine. Theon was Reek. We get lots of different characters have lots of different names. So the fact that Jon has 2 or 3 different names is not really. It's the surprise is that he's not had that many names so far. As for Littlefinger's story about Robert's twin bastards born in Castle Rock. Yeah, I mean, we shouldn't take everything that Littlefinger says at his word, but this kind of rings true, and it also doesn't. He didn't seem to be trying to achieve anything with this bit of extra information. It just, it kind of maybe set Starks against Lannisters a little bit more, but I mean, it seems completely within character, and I don't think it surprises anyone. So the backstory is that there was a time when Robert Baratheon, when married to Cersei, was at Castle Rock and slept with one of the servants there. The servant had twins. These were obviously then his bastard children. Cersei ordered them to be killed because that was just too close to home. She couldn't order all of his bastard children across King's Landing, wherever, to be killed, but to be, in her eyes, humiliated in that way in Castle Rock was just too much. So it kind of makes sense that happened. Can we believe it never made its way back to Robert Baratheon? Yeah, I think we can, for 2 reasons. Firstly, this was at Castle Rock, and by the time that it was known that these were Baratheon children, illegitimate Baratheon children, he wouldn't have been there anymore. So it would have been dealt with as an internal matter at Castle Rock. And then we also have to remember that whereas for his first 1 or 2 bastard children that he did seem to dote on, by the time he was king, he didn't really pay much attention. He didn't care that much. It was Varys who seemed to be looking after them rather than Robert. Robert just sort of said, just make sure they're okay. And so he did not want to know who all of these bastard children were. So he wasn't looking out for it, and I don't think it would have made much difference. Question from Jamie McKenna saying, hi there, Jamie, saying, happy to catch you live, Sir Robert. It's been a minute. Love this topic. Sorry, you just disappeared off the top of my chat. Here we go. Love this topic as I myself am a bastard. Well, I'm sure you're, as George R. R. Martin say, it doesn't matter. It's fantastic. Just showing some love. Cheers, mate, and to the mods. So there we go. I mean, I think this is George R. R. Martin picking up something that mattered a lot more in the medieval world than it does in certainly the Western world we have here right now. So Cloaked One, picking up Cloaked One, you do this a lot, thank you so much. Picking up 4, Vitamin J7. This is my first time watching live from the beginning. Well, welcome. It's a very different experience watching live, and welcome. It's great to have you. Do you think Ramsay's demise will be similar in the books? Thanks for all your hard work. Ish, but there's one big difference, I would say. So I think that he will die when Jon and the combined armies of the North, which is what it will probably end up being, take Winterfell. I think that is when he will die. However, the big difference is that on the show, his actual death with his own hounds was Sansa. She was the one who ordered it because of what happened to her, because she had been married to Ramsay, and Ramsay was horrific to her. So this was her getting her revenge, her justice. That's not the case in the books. It was Jane Poole who was married to Ramsay. So Sansa's not going to be the one doing it, but the Starks as a whole will have a lot of issues with Ramsay. They will want him dead, but at least partly, obviously, because of the whole rebelling against the Starks, that whole business. Then you add in what he did with Jane Poole. Jane Poole, remember, was an important member of the house, the Stark household. She was best friends with Sansa. We see all the way through book 1. She's there all the time at Sansa's side, talking, the giggling, and so she was close to them. Then he did what he did with Theon. Theon obviously grew up as a brother, effectively, to the Stark children. Then I think there's a good chance that he's going to kill Rickon. So the Starks as a whole they have every reason to get rid of him. And being killed by his own hounds, there may be some poetic justice there, particularly if it's the hounds who kill Rickon, which is very possible, because we're specifically told they have been trained to hunt humans and wolves. Rickon and a wolf. So I think it may well happen in a similar way, but it's not going to have the same feel of this just being Sansa against Ramsay. This is the whole Stark family will have a grudge against Ramsay. Sabrina Temi saying hello to my favorite YouTuber. Oh, thank you. How do you think they could tell who was an actual bastard? Surely anyone could claim to be a bastard, as there were no DNA tests, etc. Sorry if you answered already. Yeah, well, this is very true, and the short answer is they couldn't. So we get this in book 1. We see sort of how this operates. You get Barra, who is the baby bastard child of Robert Baratheon. Mother's a sex worker in King's Landing, and you had Ned, who goes there, and the mother's all, here's the baby. This is the King's, Robert Baratheon's, and Ned sort of goes and has a look and says, yeah, that looks like a Baratheon child. So they kind of believe it, and they will know that he was there. There will be some chancers who just try it and say, my child is the child of whoever. And there's the onus of proof is on the person who says that their child is a bastard. And it's quite a risky business, given the power dynamic that you've got going on there. If you say, my child is the child of this noble lord, and that noble lord does not wish to have a reputation of having bastard children, then that is quite a dangerous thing to go off and do. And added to which, although the assumption is that if a lord has a child, a bastard child somewhere, then they will make arrangements for them to be looked after. There's no law to say you have to do that. So there's no way of proving it. So basically, you just kind of have to do it on a case-by-case basis. And it helps if they look like their lordly parent. Question from Evan Power. Although commoners do marry, it doesn't seem important. Is there ever a lowborn called bastard? Can they inherit? Are weirwoods and septons needed to wed? Yeah, so the situation is that weddings are less important. There does appear to be some sort of a feel of common law marriage in Westeros. There are traveling septons, and this is the way that this seems to work mostly, is that they sort of move around from village to village, and so you will get married when the septon comes to you. Then that's your turn. You can get married then, but then sometimes people don't the surname and the inheritance are a lot less important when you're just small folk and you're just like, this is one person on a farm over here, one person on a farm over here. It doesn't matter that much unless you're hugely into the religion. It doesn't matter that much that whether or not you're technically married. So yeah, it's not a big thing. And the weirwoods in the north is that you could go off and get married in front of a weirwood. You need to have a witness, but the weirwood itself also witnesses. So lowborn bastards is not so much of a concept. This is really only a concept for those of the sort of the 1%, the lords, which just all adds up to pointing out again that George R. R. Martin, he wants us to care about the great mass of small folk in this story. This is one of his big focuses, but still we're being shown this story almost uniquely from the perspective of the 1%, from the most rich, the most powerful people there. If you just go through your roll call of whose perspectives are we seeing this story from, it's Lannisters, it's Starks, it's Targaryens, it's people who are at the top of the feudal tree, so to speak. That is all of the money and power and influence moves up to them. We don't have many characters at all who are there at the bottom, and this is why George R. R. Martin was so keen, incidentally, to have a spin-off show, which may still happen, being Spear Carriers that's the title he has for it. He liked the idea of Rome, that older classic HBO series, when they tried to show the story of Rome not through the high and mighty, but actual normal soldiers. And he loves this idea of seeing things through the eyes of the normal folk, but that's not the way he chose to show this story. Cloaked one for Mistman Jones. Thank you so much. Do you think we might meet any Lannister bastards? Could potentially affect the Valonqar prophecy if the bastards are Tywins. Well, there are Lannister bastards out there. But in terms of the Lannisters we know, the important Lannisters, I still think that there's a good chance that the sailor's wife, who's a sex worker up in Bravos, has a daughter called Lana with golden hair. I'm almost certain that she's a Lannister bastard. The only question is whether this is Tyrion or Gerion's bastard child. It could be either. The Lannister children, Joffrey, Tommen, and Myrcella, are technically all bastards as well. As for Tywin, it was only right at the very end that we got this hint that maybe he'd been not as abstemious as perhaps we'd originally thought. So I suspect that if there were any bastard children from him, then he would have kept them incredibly secret. I don't think we're going to find them coming up in this story. In terms of the Valonqar prophecy, I think the only way I think this might impact on it, and I don't think this is what's going to happen, but on the show there was like this Cersei being pregnant. Is this Euron's baby? I think there's a possibility they may go down that, or George R. R. Martin may be going down that route in the books, but we're still far enough away from there that we can't be sure on that one. Pat Prito saying, first time catching you live. Welcome. What do you think Lady Stoneheart did with Edric Dane? I imagine she would have a problem since she thinks Jon is Ashara's bastard with Ned, and since Edric goes by Ned. Sorry of too tangential. Well, I'll happily quickly answer this one. So Ned has left the Brotherhood without banners now. The question of what she would think, personally, my take on the character of Lady Stoneheart, she died, and when she, as Catelyn, when she came back, all that was left of her, all that lingered of the old cat, was this desire for vengeance and justice, and the people who have done wrong to House Stark. Now, I do not think that she will care anymore about Edric Ned Dane. I don't think that's on her mind anymore. What's on her mind is the phrase. What's on the mind is where are her children? That is what is driving her. Edric Dane, I think Kat would probably, in and of herself, probably before the Lady Stoneheart thing, she wasn't a cruel person. Just generally, she had her reasons for disliking Jon and was cruel to him, but just the Edric Dane, I mean, it might bring back a few bad memories for her, or imagined bad memories, but he's not Ned's bastard child. He's not anything to do with the situation that she thought was going on down there. He's the son of different Dane. So I don't think that she would have a problem with him personally, and particularly given if he was on her side. But they never really got a chance. He has escaped away and gone away because he saw what she was doing. Question from Mike McFly. When Jon goes down into the crypts, he always feels uneasy, like they are judging him and that he doesn't belong. How much of that do you think is him internalizing how he feels as a bastard, that he doesn't belong anywhere? And how much do you think it might actually be the crypts themselves? Because at the very least, he believes he's Ned's son, even as a bastard. He is in his mind a Stark, and as we are all pretty much know, he is a Stark from his mother Lyanna, whether she and Rhaegar were married or not. What do you think? Okay, so the crypts. Love talking about the crypts. So the fact that when Jon is down there in his dreams, that the statues seem to be alive in some way, that is absolutely I don't know with this every time, but pretty much every time we read about them, the statues seem alive. So that bit is not a surprise. I think the way I would look at this is that this is not Jon going down there himself as in real life. This is a recurring dream. He tells Sam this is a recurring dream, and then we see it again and again, 3 or 4 times in the text. Each time he gets closer down, further down into the crypts. And he's searching for something each time. And when he gets to the crypts, then they're saying, you don't belong here. You're not a Stark. The question we have to ask is, where are these dreams coming from? Is this just him in his mind? The biggest worry he has right now is the fact that he's a bastard child and he doesn't know who's... No. That's not actually what he's thinking about most of the time. Yes, he does think about him being a bastard. He does wonder who his mother is, but that's not the thing on his mind most in the story. It less and less, the deeper into the story we get. Once he's become a member of the Night's Watch, he does accept the fact that then he's not... he's got a new family. He's joined a new family. So why is it that he's still having this recurring dream about going down to the Winterfell crypts? Well, the Winterfell crypts are about Starkishness, and at the end we know there is Lyanna Stark's statue. So is there a possibility that this is not just a random dream because it's this is what's on his mind, something. Maybe this is something which has been planted in his mind. The fact that this is a recurring dream does seem to suggest this. The fact that Jon has had another dream that does seem to have been planted in him by Bloodraven. I'm not going to go into all of it, but there's the Azor Ahai dream when he's standing atop the wall, the fiery sword fighting down the others. That very, very clearly in my mind, I did a video on it if you're interested, very, very clearly in my mind was Bloodraven working in his dreams, trying to get this thought into his head. Might he also have been doing these other dreams? Why would he want to be doing these other dreams? Because he wants to show him what his true parentage is. And the key to that true parentage is Lyanna. Now, so the feel is he's searching for something. He's trying to find something. He goes down. He is not a Stark, because from Bloodraven's perspective, if they married, he's not a Stark, he's a Targaryen. He goes down into there, and eventually the logical flow of these dreams is that each time he's getting further. First time he's just looking around Winterfell and then starts heading towards the crypts. Second time he goes down to the steps. Third time he's walking through the statues. He's moving towards Lyanna's statue each time he's having this dream. So logically, later on, we're going to have him, and in that dream, end up at Lyanna's statue. So that's what I think is going on with that one. Question in the chat. I think I missed one. Reflective rambling, picking up for Isaac Hooson. Thank you so much. You do this a lot too. I hugely appreciate it. Saying, how different is the life of a Dornish illegitimate child compared to all the others? Completely is the short answer. It's the Dornish don't care is the best way of saying it. They're just completely relaxed and liberal and open-minded about it. And so you get the Red Viper, Oberyn Martell, has got the Sand Snakes, 7, 8, always lose track of quite how many there are. These are all illegitimate children to the eyes of the rest of Westeros. The youngest 4 are all by his known paramour, Ilaria Sand. The others are by other, say, random women that he obviously knew at the time, dotted around the world in Westeros and Essos. And he treats them all equally. And it's not just him. It's the court, it's the Martells as a whole, it's Dorne as a whole. They are treated as being equal to people who were born legitimate children, to the extent that actually where we're going to end up in the Winds of Winter is that they're sending I think it's Lady Nym to King's Landing as the representative of the Dornish to be a member of the small council. They don't mind. That will cause a little bit of a ruckus in King's Landing. I'm sure that they're sending a bastard to King's Landing to take on an official role, but to the Dornish, it's not an issue. So it's completely different. And frankly, it doesn't matter to them. J. Lord, it's interesting that Jon, before going to the Wall, does not know how good he has got it. He's one of the wealthiest bastards alive. Yeah, this is really true. And this is something that comes up again and again in book 1, which I've been rereading, re-listening to. If you want my thoughts, I'm going through chapter by chapter. That over on Twitter, you can find me, just hunt for In Deep Geek over on Twitter. I do 2, 3, 4 chapters a week, so just keep an eye out for that. This is something that comes up again and again. I was literally just yesterday, I think, listening to a Jon chapter, the Jon chapter when he's about to do his Night's Watch vows, and he gets told that he's a steward, and he basically throws a teenage strop. He's only 14 at this point. He throws a teenage strop and literally shouts out, "It's not fair!" And then Darion, who we meet again later, basically points this out to him that he might think it's not fair, but he chose to come here. Darion didn't have any choice in it whatsoever. Most of the other people who go to the Wall don't have a choice in it whatsoever. Jon, when he starts out in the yard fighting or training with the other new recruits, he just simply does not realize quite how privileged he is to have been trained to fight before. The rest of them hadn't. They hadn't got the foggiest idea. And again, he's having to come back to this fact that, yeah, he did have an incredibly privileged upbringing, and he is actually giving up quite a lot to be going there. He didn't have much of a choice. He was pushed out by Cat effectively, but yeah, he does not know, he does not realize quite how lucky he is. He's I would say he wears his privilege lightly, but he's just unaware of his privilege a huge amount of the time in the early books. It's only later on that he's starting to understand a lot about the world and who he is. Let's move from John to thinking about Ramsey Bolton, or Ramsey Snow, as he was. I've got a few questions from my patrons here, and let's start with one from Jazz Singh saying, in the show we had the Battle of the Bastards showpiece. I said we'd come back to the Battle of the Bastards, which was a great viewing experience, but I feel is unlikely to happen in the books. In which case, how do you think Ramsay's story will end? Do you even see him surviving the Battle of Ice against Stannis? And Brian Sheeran saying, hi, Robert, I was lucky enough to be an extra on the last 3 seasons. My first experience was the Battle of the Bastards. 500-ish extras in a Northern Irish field, having the time of our lives. Bastard-related question, could the Battle of the Bastards have been any better? I don't think it could. Well, I will first of all say, Jazz, I'll come back to yours because I want to take these both together. But first of all, Brian, very jealous. That's a great story you can tell, and quite rightly so. It was a wonderful bit of cinematography in my mind. I loved it to bits. I met actually a couple of years ago when I was in Nashville for Con of Thrones. News alert, if you hadn't heard, they cancelled Con of Thrones for this year. Hopefully it will be back, and cons as a whole will be back next year. But I met Andy the Extra, and who you may know from that behind the scenes of season 8, who was you would recognize him, the Extra, who was the Stark soldier who survived, big bushy beard, sort of helmet just like that, survived so many battles and just kept on going, standing there a little bit behind Jon Snow all the way through. He was an amazing guy. He had some fantastic stories to tell about the Battle of the Bastards as well. Could it have been any better as a bit of TV spectacle? No, I don't think so. I think that was one of the high points of the whole TV show. And it was one of those things that when people and I mean, I wouldn't disagree, but would say, you know, the latter seasons were worse, that they were, but there were still some standout moments. The standout moments were more to do with the television, the quality of television, rather than the sort of the storyline and plotting and things like that, I would argue. But anyway, could it have been any better? Well, I mean, it could have been in terms of plotting. I can remember thinking at the time, still think the fact that Littlefinger arrives with a whole army, completely surprising everyone, didn't seem 100% realistic. Were there no scouts looking out for this? Did Sansa really not tell people that, hey, hang on, if you just wait for a few hours, then I've got a huge amount of cavalry just coming up? That didn't quite hold together for me. But in terms of how it looked, in terms of the story, I don't think that could have been beaten. That was wonderful. Jazz Singh saying, is it likely to happen in the books? How will Ramsay's story end? Will he survive the Battle of Ice against Stannis? Well, let's just quickly set out what we've got in terms of battles in the north coming up, because it's not just one battle. We've got at least 2 and possibly 3. So Stannis is camped in a crofter's village a few days outside Winterfell. His army are there, freezing to death at the moment, but the Ramsey Bolton is aware that they're there and has sent out an army of the Freys and the Manderleys. Now, this is as much about getting the Freys and Manderleys out of Winterfell as it is engaging with Stannis, to be honest. The Freys and Manderleys have been at each other's throats in Winterfell, and he just wants them out of there. There's been murders. It's been not great. They're eating up all of the food reserves. So he just sends both of the armies out. He says, right, you go off there. So the Boltons are staying there with a few other allies, and the Freys and the Manderleys are heading out. The Freys and the Manderleys are going to go and attack Stannis. The Freys are going to be decimated. The Frey army will be destroyed. The Manderleys will turn on them. Stannis' army will attack them. That is the first battle of ice. But at the end of that, they're still fundamentally in the same situation. Roose Bolton is in Winterfell. Winterfell is a very hard castle to take, and everyone's outside it, and the weather's getting worse. So there has to be at least one extra battle to take Winterfell. Now, we don't know that. We know the sort of the iteration of events. We don't yet know the exact timing, because the snow has to go, because Stannis' army, no matter what, they will not be able to survive another few weeks out in the snow. So maybe they will attack Winterfell because they're forced to do it. But Melisandre is almost certainly, this is where the Shireen thing is going to come in, because she will see this as potentially destroying Stannis' entire purpose, the weather, the snow. And if she can use magic to hold back the cold for a bit, to stop the snows for a bit, that will not just... And what happened on the TV show was she did that, and it just allowed them to march to Winterfell. This will keep them alive. It's as simple as that. This will keep them alive. So maybe Stannis has to try and attack first. There's lots of things going on in and around Winterfell, lots of different factions, so that's possible. But that is not going to be successful, because Jon has to come down from the wall, leading some wildlings, and they will, and probably at some point joined by Littlefinger with his army, because he will spy the opportunity to get Sansa on the throne up in the north. All of that will come together, and it will end in some sort of battle. Now, the Battle of the Bastards, will it happen the same in the books? It won't be exactly the same, no. Of course, it's not going to be exactly the same. George R. R. Martin's kind of gave the game away a while ago when he was talking about this, and he talked about watching it and thinking about how his Battle of the Bastards would work differently, and he didn't say in exactly that way, but the very clear implication was not that, well, that's that, none of that's happening. It was just that I'm going to do that in a different way. So expect some sort of Battle of the Bastards, but not happening in exactly the same way. The end result will be that the Starks retake Winterfell, and Ramsay, having inflicted huge amounts of damage, as I've already said, Jane Poole, Theon, Rickon, the Starks will end up killing him. J Lord, thank you again, saying, have you played Elder Scrolls? Because the Bretons are a race descended from the bastard of elves and human slave women. Now that's dark. I'm a big fan of Skyrim. And I'm eagerly awaiting. It's waiting for the next in the Elder Scrolls series is it's like waiting for the next book in A Song of Ice and Fire. If you're a fan, then you know what I mean. The sort of big gaming announcement conventions roll round every now and then you just watch it and see, nope, they're still not talking about it there. They're going to release it at some point, but they're still not talking about it. So I love the Elder Scrolls. But being a race descended from bastard elves and human slave women, I have to admit, I'm not into all of the lore of it, but that does certainly make a huge amount of sense. Cloaked One, Picking up for Alvaro Ruiz, thank you so much, saying, assuming King Robert lived, what was Ned's plan after telling Jon who his parents were? The word would spread and eventually reach Robert or Varys or Littlefinger. I don't think he had a plan. I mean, everything we see from Ned, I mean, it's going through book one when he's there in King's Landing, he's just, it's frustrating because you look and see, okay, this is only going one way, Ned. You keep on giving your forces away left, right, and center. You keep on telling Cersei, you should just go because, I'll come and take over. He didn't have a plan. Renly said, right, we should seize power now. He says, yeah, not yet. I can't do that yet. He didn't really have a plan, not until the very last minute. And it was almost as if his plan was to trust that good things would happen and people would do sensible things. His plan was that he kept on hoping that Cersei would take his warning and leave with her children, and that would be all right. Then he was hoping that Robert Baratheon would recover. So he doesn't seem to have that much of a, then he was hoping that maybe people would see sense and join his side. No, he's not. He's not a planning kind of guy. So I wish I'd loved that he were, but he didn't have a plan. I think he genuinely just thought, well, I'll tell him, and trust that he will do the right thing. So yeah, that's it. Ned's not perfect. He had a lot of flaws. Cloaked One again, picking up for this time for Mattia Dominique. What's your take on Bloodraven's earlier life as a courtly bastard? The HOW, I assume is History of Westeros, made episodes on him, but I'd like to hear your thoughts. Yeah, well, Bloodraven is a very complicated character. He started out, he was magical from even then. All the rumors are, that he imply that he could skin change, that he could do all sorts of scrying, and we see hints that he can change his appearance with glamoring. His feeling from, or his driving force from very early on seems to have been this notion of the greater good. That seems to have been the thing which drove him all the way through. He would do things that others would consider to be beyond the pale because he thought he knew best. He thought he knew what had to happen in order to save the kingdom, to look after the kingdom. And he was quite willing to be that person who got their hands dirty in order to save everyone else. So that seems to be what he thinks of himself as being a kind of a self-sacrificial figure, I suspect. I think he sees himself as being someone who, yes, is cleverer than everyone else, but he's there allowing himself to take the rap for stuff. So when he went up to the wall, that was because he'd broken a sacred vow of trust and killed off the last Blackfire pretender, effectively, even though he was on, he promised him safe conduct, and he broke that. And then he recognized the fact that Aegon V couldn't allow it to be seen that he was unpunished, because otherwise no one would ever believe a king's promise again. So Bloodraven seems to have gone, yeah, fair enough, I'll take it. I accept that. I will take the rap for that rather than you. That's best for the kingdom, and I'll go on. So I think he sees himself as being a character who does what is best for everyone. But most people don't know it, don't understand it, and I don't think he cares. And this is actually a lack of ego thing, or quite a big ego from the classical sense of self-worth. But he doesn't care if people know what he did. what he could do, what his achievements were. He just cared about the end result. Very pragmatic. It's all about outcomes, not outputs. It's not about praise for him himself. It's not about how other people see him. So that's the sort of the genesis of the character. And then you take him up to the wall, and we don't know the point at which he started understanding the threat of the others, but when you start saying, and there's this even bigger threat, that's the point at which he'd be willing to sacrifice everything in order to do it, and doesn't care if people know or do not know what his role in that is. Cloaked One, again, thank you so much, saying, for Thomas de Kirschmecker, considering Oris Baratheon was the bastard brother of Aegon the Conqueror, House Baratheon came from a bastard line. Are there other houses with direct bastard lineage? Well, probably a lot. I've got a question quite a bit later about Vale the Bard, and that actually, if you go back into the story, House Stark, at some point, we don't know exactly when in the history this was, but at some point, if the legend is true, the current Lords of Winterfell are descended from a bastard child. So you have that. You have, yes, the Baratheons. The Martells don't really care. I wouldn't surprise me in the slightest if there was bastards, because bastards can inherit. In the concept of bastardy doesn't really exist even, so they don't record it as a thing. And you get even the Targaryens. There are some that you go, are they? I mean, is that really the right child of that? That Fire and Blood has a huge amount of subplot about, is this really that person's child? Are these actually strong children, or are they Velaryon Targaryen children? There's a lot that you can go through. Even Maegor the Cruel, for example, was he really Aegon's son? It's not clear. So there are a lot. Question from where have I got up to? Bettina Nielsen, just want to say thank you, and thank you to the mods. Thank you, moderators, and thank you, and again, moderators, you do an amazing job. So thank you very much. Question from J Lord: when the elves ruled this is going to the Elder Scrolls. When the elves ruled High Rock, they enslaved the women from the human tribes, and their children were the first Bretons. They sure aren't Tolkien's elves. No, they're not. Tolkien's elves are very, very different. But yeah, thank you for that. I shall look into that. It's a bit of lore that I was unaware of. Sabrina Temi: did Robert Baratheon not suspect that Cersei's children were bastards? They looked nothing like him. Who else initially suspected apart from Jon Arryn? What made him suspicious? What made him suspicious anyway? Thanks, Robert. Right. So, did he ever suspect? I think his ego was too great for him to suspect that, personally, and was happy spend. I mean, most of his time he was drunk. To be honest, he was drunk. He was thinking about other things. It wasn't an issue, so nobody raised it with him. Did others think it? Well, Littlefinger very clearly did know about this. When Ned tells him what's going on, Littlefinger, Littlefinger goes, "Really? How shocking," or something along those lines, in a very, I'm obviously not even slightly shocked by this news. So it was known, and if Littlefinger knew about it, and Varys would have known about it, it was known by some people. Where did Jon Arryn and Stannis? We always forget Stannis's role in this as well. Stannis was there, the two of them. Where did they start? Why did they start thinking about this? Well, We're not told the exact genesis of it. We know that there's that book that Ned was reading. We know that they hunted down some of the bastard children there. I suspect Littlefinger may well have planted a seed of an idea as well, because he was wanting to create chaos, and that is a way to create chaos. Will Stack, I'm so glad I got to catch one of these live. Thanks for all the content over the past year and a bit in lockdown. I was wondering, what is the most tinfoily theory involving a bastard that you subscribe to? I don't know. Tinfoily to do with a bastard that I subscribe to. I mean, I'll come back to Tyrion Targaryen again. I don't say I subscribe to it, but it's one of these things. I'm keeping an eye on my reread. I'm keeping an eye out, because the first few chapters of Tyrion, they are so strong on the Targaryen imagery for him. So strong. George R. R. Martin dials back on that a lot. But to start with, you get, when I was younger, I used to dream of dragons. I used to stare at the flames and think of dragons. You remember him when he remembers when he goes to look at the dragon skulls in King's Landing, and how, the language that he liked it, and they seemed to like him. It is really strong, all of this symbolism implying he might actually be a Targaryen bastard. So I love it. I can't say that I 100% subscribe, because I don't think that we've got the information yet, and it's the theory that I do oscillate on the most. But yes, that would be where I would go. Is it tinfoil? I don't know, to be honest, but I like it nonetheless. Vixtable, Robert, long time. Yeah, it has. Welcome back. Do you think the Battle of the Bastards will happen in the books? Do you think Sansa and the Lords of the Vale will be the deciding factor in the books? Yes and yes. So I started talking about this a moment ago. We'll come back to this. So the situation we're going to have is that Stannis will win this first Battle of Ice, but his situation is not actually changed that much. His army is still dying. He's still outside Winterfell. The only way that he's going to survive is to get inside Winterfell. Melisandre will be able to discover what's going on, and will see the only way to save Stannis is to get rid of. Exactly how she does this, in terms of, is she changing the seasons, if she's fighting the weather. We know that her magic is very strong at the wall. She's mentioned this. So this is where the sacrifice of Shireen is almost certainly going to come in, and that is going to allow Stannis to then advance on Winterfell. Now, whether there's another battle there or not, that's the bit that is slightly uncertain, because it does matter. Timings matter quite a lot here. I suspect he probably will, because of the timings of other things, because Jon at the wall obviously has just died. We needed a little bit of time for him to come back, and then if he was dead set before he died, he was dead set on going to Winterfell. So let's assume he's going to do that. Going from the wall to Winterfell is still quite a journey, and it will take quite some time for them to get down there, even if Melisandre gets rid of the snow. If she doesn't, we got told that road is almost impassable now, so that will take a little while. Littlefinger and the Knights of the Vale, they can get up to Winterfell quicker than you might think, because they can go by boat and then up the White Knife River. Again, that may well be frozen over, but that is a quicker way up to Winterfell by boat than overland. Now, they will get there as and when Littlefinger has secured the Vale in his mind, and this is what he's doing right now. He's securing the Lord's Declarant, is one by one winning them over to his side. Once he's happy that he's secured the Vale, then he's going to turn his mind to, where next can I gain power? And he will hear the reports that Bran and Rickon are dead. He is holding Sansa. Arya has gone missing, or the claim is that she's up at Winterfell being married to Ramsay, but he will probably hear that that's not actually her, in which case Sansa has got a better claim to Winterfell. So that is what is going to take him up there with Sansa. The question is timing of when all of these different groups are going to get there. There will be some sort of Battle of the Bastards of that, I'm reasonably certain. I think that probably the Vale will come at about the right time, but it is a matter of timing, and we simply do not know. Question from Robin Ludwig Isomar saying, is Bloodraven still Bloodraven? When Bran meets him, he talks of Brynden Rivers almost as if he was a different person. Yes, he is, but he's also sucked up within the Weirwood network. So he, and we haven't been given a law on exactly how this works, but it does appear so he gets hooked up into, and he's got to the extent that he's got a root now coming out through his eye socket. That's how he physically cannot move anymore. That's it. He's now plugged in. Now he still retains the memories of him, and he still can talk to Bran as Brynden Rivers, but most of the time he's kind of like hooked up. When we talked about this a bit last time, the fact that we do use kind of computer terms for it because that's our best way of understanding it. The way, if you think of in terms of more sort of computing or modern terms, then yes, he's hooked up to the Weirwood network, but his interface is still Brynden Rivers, is still Bloodraven. So his interface with the outside world is still Bloodraven. But in terms of where his brain is and what's going on in there, then it's very much a part of the Weirwood network as a whole. That's certainly my take, but we haven't had any definitive explanation of how this works from George R.R. Martin. Paige Papa Joy saying, hi Robert, apologies if this has been covered. By who and by what means could a bastard be legitimized? Is a maester necessary to officially document it in all circumstances? All the best. Well, we haven't covered it specifically, so I'm very happy to do that. There's a couple of levels to this. The first is acknowledgement, and the second is legitimization. So if there's a bastard child out there, then they sort of get presented and said, this is bastard child of whatever noble lord or whatever. The lord can then choose to acknowledge, yes, that is my child. That's the first step. A lot of the time they do not do that, but some of the time they do not do that. But when they do acknowledge, then comes the assumption that they will make some arrangement for that child. There is an assumption of responsibility. That they will then take care in some way. Now, what that is will vary hugely. What happens a lot of the time is that they will just be sent back out to wherever the mother is. It usually is that way around, the mother of the child, and they'll just make sure that certain funds gets sent over there every now and then so that they have an okay existence. So that's one of the things. That seems to have been what happened with most of the Robert Baratheon's King's Landing bastards. Now, that was done through Varys, and Varys sort of took care of it for the king, so the king didn't have to think about it at all. Perhaps Varys didn't even tell the king who it was, but there was a clear assumption that Gendry, for example, was given over as an apprentice to the blacksmith Tobbo Mott, and he was given an amount of money and an extra amount of money for his silence, and basically told, just look after him. He's here. And Tobbo Mott didn't then. Obviously he's clever. He could figure out what was going on, but he was looked after. So Gendry was sorted out. So that's one thing that you could do. Another thing is that you might then have them in your wider household as a servant. This is where, completely random example, Thalia Flowers, the woman that Euron then she then becomes pregnant with Euron's child. She was the illegitimate daughter of the Lord there of the Shield Islands, and that he kept her as a servant, and so that his legitimate children didn't treat her very well. We get a little bit of the backstory there. So that's one thing that could happen. What very rarely happened was what Ned did, which was taking a bastard child and installing them as a member of your household, equivalent to one of your children, not in the line of succession, but being raised and taught alongside them, which is what happened with Jon. So that was very rare. Sometimes you might put them and create a new house for them or something like that. So there are lots of different options, but once you acknowledge a bastard, then the implication is that you will then in some way look after them or sponsor them. Maybe they'll come to court or something like that. The legitimization is the next step, and this is quite rare. This is when, and it has to be done by a king to legitimize somebody and say, okay, that person is now in the line of succession. And yes, it will have to be formally recorded by somebody, and that, yes, that will be a maester, but the key thing here is that this has to be done by a king. Question from J. Lord again, thank you. I loathe the Tyrion Targaryen theory. His whole arc is that he is the most like Tywin, more than Jaime or Cersei, who are stupid compared to Tywin. Yeah, so this is the other half of it. So when I say that I oscillate on this more than any other, I love the very human drama of the fact that, as you say, he thinks like Tywin. He's clever like Tywin is. For all of the bad things about Tywin's character, nobody ever questioned that he was clever, and Tyrion is undoubtedly clever. And the fact that Tywin distanced himself, you're not my son, that the human drama there works so well if he actually is his son. It works even better if the other two aren't. But Tyrion is, which, it's possible. But as I say, I oscillate one way and the other on this one because of the evidence. George R. Martin, I mean, it's great that he's done it. He has presented enough evidence that you can argue cogently one way or the other. And I suspect that's the way the story is going to carry on with Tyrion, is that we could, at the end of it, argue either to be true. Question from Kraken Tacos. Hi there, Kraken Tacos. Great to see you. Just throwing support to one of my favorite channels ever. Well, thank you very much. You've been a wonderful support and a mainstay here of the modding community as well for a very long time. So thank you so much. That means a huge amount to me, Kraken Tacos. Thank you. And Mara Lee, again, thank you so much, saying, Robert, Bloodraven is one of my favourite characters. Do you think we will get to read any more about his backstory in future Duncan Egg novels? Well, yes. If George R. R. Martin writes them. And just so you're aware in terms of what he said for priorities, Winds of Winter first. Then maybe another Duncan Egg novel. That one is probably going to be The She-Wolves of Winterfell. Then A Dream of Spring. Then other Duncan Egg, Fire and Blood 2. So that's a long way into the future. He has said that the plan for the Duncan Egg stories is to take it all the way through the life of Duncan Egg, which takes them all the way up to their deaths, and will definitely therefore include the point at which Egg becomes king, which that story bit definitely has to include Bloodraven. So what we're going to see, if these stories are written, is probably for the next 2 or 3, Bloodraven's going to remain the same sort of character that we have had him so far in Duncan Egg. Anyway, just in the background, just maybe making an odd appearance. We hear about him. He is the most powerful person in the realm, the most influential person in the realm. Everybody is aware of him, so he's always there, just sort of hovering, watching. That is how he's going to remain for the next 2 or 3 stories. Then he will grow into being an incredibly important character, leading to the crowning of Aegon V. And then after that, he will go up to the wall and we'll hear a lot less about him. So we will, if the stories are written, yes, we will get more about him. But it's less about his background and more about actually just seeing him there and seeing the impact increasingly with Bloodraven. It's you see the impacts of what he does rather than just a list of what he achieves or his actions or anything like that. The books of A Song of Ice and Fire, so much you can trace, and I did, as you all know, I did a series of videos setting out all the things that Bloodraven seems to have been doing behind the scenes that there's clear evidence for, but we're never told this was Bloodraven, but it's pretty obvious. Mara Lee, again, thank you so much, saying, if at the end of the book series Widow's Wail and Oathkeeper get reforged to become ice again, do you think Gendry will be commissioned to perform that job? Yeah, why not? So Gendry is a blacksmith. He's been well trained. He is currently at the crossroads. He is being blacksmith to the Brotherhood Without Banners. This does seem to, it has to lead somewhere, this him being a blacksmith thing. So what's he going to do? Will he make another Warhammer, aka Robert Baratheon? Will he be the person that did Tobbo Mott teach him how to reforge Valyrian steel? We do not know. The implication is that he hadn't qualified as a master. Tobbo Mott is one of the very few people who knows how to reforge Valyrian steel. So it's possible he taught Gendry, because doing it is just, it requires spells. It's not just being a good blacksmith. You need to know the spells, we're told. So maybe he could, but Tobbo Mott is the main man there. There's also the information down, obviously, in Old Town, because they forge the Maester's Link, which is made out of Valyrian steel. So yeah, it's possible, and it certainly does seem to be, I mean, it has to have some impact on the story at some point, the fact that he's a blacksmith. Nemo Nova saying the Cthulhu download worked. Thank you for your help. Thank you for all that you do. We enjoy these live streams so much. Well, thank you. And thank you for letting me know. That's what I do. My second channel. If you're unaware of this, I love classic science fiction and fantasy. It's a second channel. It's also a podcast called The Well Told Tale, and I narrate the best science fiction and fantasy stories ever written. So they go from the classic science fiction of H.G. Wells, like The Time Machine, War of the Worlds, things like that, Call of Cthulhu, some other great fantastical stories like Alice in Wonderland, The Wizard of Oz. What I try and do is mix it up a bit, but get the real groundings of what has been the basis for fantasy literature, science fiction literature that we have today. So we've got Conan there, we've got early stories from people like Arthur C. Clarke, Isaac Asimov. What are the building blocks? Not just so that we can go back and say, oh yeah, so that's where this came, but because they're amazing stories and I love sharing them. They will always be, those stories will always be made available through the podcast and on YouTube for free. But I do, if you're interested in, because they're done sort of episodically, if you're interested in getting a download of a full story, everything sort of joined together seamlessly, then you can, or if you go have a look on deepgeek.com. I don't often advertise the website. There's not much on there at the moment, but you can find, if you go into the shop, you can find downloads of some of those stories if you want to buy them. So please do go and check that out. Yeah, it's a passion project, but it's one I'm just going to keep on doing and just providing as much of that as I possibly can. And I'm glad that the download worked. I know that there were a couple of little issues with that. We've hopefully got that all sorted out now. Okay, so we've got Joshua Morris. Are you watching the Euros? Yes, I am. Tomorrow I will definitely be watching the Euros. Eric Ferg, a couple of questions about Ramsay. Roose claims that Ramsay's crew of followers is actually loyal to him and report on Ramsay. Do you think this is the case, or is Roose underestimating Ramsay's hold over the Bastards Boys? So the Bastards Boys, this is his group of bully boy kind of men-at-arms that Ramsay has. They follow him around everywhere. We see them in Winterfell. They're right at the middle of the action. They don't like people. They just push them over the battlements. They're really unpleasant. Now, Roose says to Theon, of all people, "Oh, actually, you know what? They work for me, not him." Can we trust that? It's quite a moot point because we simply do not know. It either would work very well. George R. R. Martin hasn't given us enough to go on. I do like the idea that Ramsay has, and Ramsay seems to be very good at the side, the sort of the mental, the psychological side of this. Getting people loyal to him does kind of make sense. The way that he completely manipulated Theon. He seems to understand how humans tick. So yes, it would work very well if they are actually loyal, as we initially thought they are actually loyal to Ramsay. So that would be my guess, but it could work either way. He then also asked about one of the Bastards Boys, Luton, who is badly wounded during the Frey-Manderley conflict inside Winterfell. Ramsay can't handle his whimpering and shoves a spear through him. Do you think this foreshadows Roose getting injured during part 2 of the Winterfell battle, with Ramsay ending his life rather than following a weakened father? So this is as good an explanation I've yet got for how Ramsay will kill Roose. I think he probably will kill Roose, but it doesn't make sense at the moment that Ramsay is out trying to track down. He will be trying to track down Jane and Rickon and people like that. And if he's going to launch a coup, he needs to be there in Winterfell, and also not when they're about to face an attack. That just doesn't make sense. So it doesn't kind of make sense strategically for him to do that now. But how might this happen? If it does happen, it's not just because it was on the show doesn't mean it's going to happen in the books. But if it does happen, yeah, that does seem like a reasonable bit of foreshadowing. They're just like he just seemed, one of his men was there clearly looking like he was going to die. It's just like, I'll just get it over and done with. That does kind of work. And he is a social climber, Ramsay. So that, pardon me, it's the best explanation I've had so far of it. I've got various different iterations of how that might work, but yeah, I do like it. Robin Isama, so happy birthday again. I'm wondering what you think about Bolt On, the theory that Roose Bolton is an immortal, skin-stealing half-other, maybe even a son of the Night's King. While I personally think that Roose makes more sense as a cold, evil human, the theory has been suggested as an explanation of why he spared Ramsay as a baby. They have the same eyes, and Roose is planning to kill Ramsay and wear his skin. Okay, for those who have not come across this, this is a theory that, I mean, it's been around for a while. Alt-Shift-X, one of his early videos was on this. I don't think Alt-Shift-X himself personally believes this, but it made for a great video. It started out, as far as I can tell, on Reddit, and it sort of it's one of those things where you can draw a lot of vague lines between things. That Roose Bolton has got, we're told, cold blue eyes. He certainly seems this quite inhuman. This idea of flaying people alive, that seems cruel. He gives this kind of cold, detached feel to everything that he does. Someone suggested that, well, why did he normally got rid of bastards, but he allowed Ramsay to live? Why? Is it because Ramsay had the same eyes as him and he wanted to then skin change into him? To me, it seems fanciful. It doesn't. There are. We always try and go with Occam's razor where we can here, and Occam's razor is not that Roose Bolton is an eternal. I mean, what even is it? Immortal, skin-stealing, half-other, maybe even the son of the Night's King. That's quite a leap. That is not Occam's razor. Occam's razor is actually he's just quite an evil human being who happens to be to have bright blue eyes. That's not a strange thing to have blue eyes. George R. R. Martin does do this though to give kind of color clues to where people are at. And early on, the Boltons were apparently loyal to the Starks. This was just like a little visual clue that maybe we need to think about them again. And Francis says, "Hi Robert, hope you're well. I find the Ramsay Snow that was portrayed on the TV show to be a lot more interesting than the Ramsay portrayed in the books. Maybe things will really pick up in the next book, but right now he seems fairly one-dimensional villain after he drops the disguise as Reek. I can't really justify this view. I guess Ewan Rion is just a great actor who can bring gravitas and depth to an irredeemable monster. Is this just my view, or are there others out there who agree with me? Well, do let me know in the chat what your thoughts are. I mean, I definitely agree that Ewan Rion is an excellent actor. I would highly recommend if you're a fan of his and don't know where else, check out Misfits, which was before he was in Game of Thrones. And just plays with this idea of subverting superhero tropes way before the boys ever got into it. Do check out Misfits, which is excellent, and Ewan Rion is fantastic in it. But in terms of book Ramsay, I prefer book Ramsay. Now, he seems more intelligent and more subtle and much more about the psychology of stuff. Now, I think that it's probably partly because they couldn't show so much of what happened to Theon on the TV, because like it would, even for Game of Thrones, it would be pretty bad having week after week after week of psychological torment. So they just showed a few highlights, but in the books we get a whole lot more of this and how he really got inside Theon's brain, and that for me, just it makes a lot more interesting character. Not a better character, but perhaps even more horrific. I think on the TV show he had to be hammed up a bit, not badly in any way, but as a character, but to take over from Joffrey as the sort of the guy we all hate, and Ewan Rion did a fantastic job of that. So hat off to him. But yeah, I personally love the book character as more complex rather than just what on the TV show seemed to be someone who was just a bit of a psychopath who just enjoyed hurting people and playing with people. I think there are more layers to the character in the books. Thomas de Kirschmacher, this is Reflective Rambling, picking up a question from you. Thank you so much. There are only 2 bastard swords mentioned in the Song of Ice and Fire. Longclaw given to Jon and one wielded by Sir Rolly Duckfield. Do they have more significance? I really like Sir Duck. So a bastard sword is like a hand and a half sword. So it's not quite a full 2-handed sword, but it's more than just a long sword. The fact that Jon has a bastard sword, I think the symbolism is reasonably obvious. Rolly Duckfield he's a book only character. If you've not come across him, he was squire to John Connington in the Golden Company and came with him to be looking after Fagon. And so he then gets knighted, and Fagon actually inducts him as the first member of his Kingsguard against John Connington's better judgment. He comes across as being loyal, but probably not the best fighter. So why's he got a bastard sword? I think it's probably just there's a reason why it's not used all that much. So a two-handed sword, you get so much more power. I'm sure there are always experts on things in the chat who will be able to explain this better than I am. But with a two-handed sword, yes, it's slower. You get this on video games, thinking about Skyrim earlier, but it's slower, more damage because it's bigger, it's longer, and you're using both hands on it. A one-handed sword, a lot quicker, a lot lighter. You can also be using a shield. A hand and a half sword, it's a bit of both, but not getting the best of either. So it's quite an odd. This is why there aren't so many of them, and so maybe that is why with Rolly Duckfield. I mean, is it hinting at something Fagon? I don't know, but I think it's more hinting at something with Rolly. I would say. Question from where have I got to? Kelly Johnson. What do you think of Prince Maekar killing Baelor Breakspear, his brother, over foolish pride during the Trial of Seven? Foolish pride. I don't know. I mean, this is one of the. This is the first Dunk and Egg story, the Hedge Knight. In terms of what do I make of it, this is so Baelor Breakspear probably would have been a great king, but this is the start. My take on this, and there's no hint to me that Bloodraven specifically was involved in this, but this is the start of a 20-ish year period where, on average, once a year, a Targaryen died in strange circumstances. Either they were killed or they had some strange accident, choking on lamprey pie, whatever. And this is the period when Bloodraven is in control. And so this is the sort of a tragedy that whittles the Targaryen family tree. So the Targaryen family tree started out with just the three siblings, with Aegon and his sisters. Then it expanded out by the time of the Dance of the Dragons to be that big, complicated family tree we had there. The Dance of the Dragons shrunk it back down again. Then it expanded right out to even bigger size than before. And then over a course of 20-odd years, it just shrinks right back down to the point where we have... at the end at Robert's Rebellion, there are hardly any Targaryens at all, and they're all just from one line. So something is happening there, and something that maybe one day I will do a video on. But it's in my mind that Dunk is he's not magical in any way, as far as we can tell. However, he seems to be the center of a lot of important things happening. When he goes around, stuff happens around him, and you can almost see Bloodraven. We were talking about this a little bit earlier in the stream, but Bloodraven in the Dunk and Egg stories, most of the time it's his absence. You could just sort of feel him, but he seems to be looking at Dunk and going, "What? There's something going on here with this person." Dunk has a memory of when he was a child in King's Landing, and then Bloodraven was just riding through, and Bloodraven just like turns at him and stares at him. And then when we get to the Mystery Night, which is effectively a Blackfire rebellion, and Bloodraven's there, and he's like, what are you doing here, Dunk? Why are you here? There's your input, your presence has been absolutely invaluable and important, but why are you here? Him being down in Dawn with Egg, actually, that sounds like a random bit of this is where they happen to be, but Dawn was the bit of the Seven Kingdoms, the only bits did, I think it was called the sweating sickness. It swept the land, lots and lots of people died. Some Targaryens died. Egg survived because Dunk took him down there. So Dunk seems to be this kind of character who is not, it would appear, to be magical. However, he's the catalyst for a lot, and there's something in there. I haven't yet worked out a full theory on this. By all means, other people run with it, but he's very, very important. And around him, kings rise and fall. In book one, we get we talk about Baelor Breaks, but that only happened because of Dunk. That a future king died because of Dunk. He's there, he looks at his foot, and his foot should have been chopped off, and he looks at it and says, well, why is this, how was this foot, what role is this foot going to play? Because this foot has been saved at the cost of a prince's life for the kingdom. Is this foot ever going to save the kingdom? So there's a lot going on there with him. Sebastian Holden, will Jon have a child beyond the wall? Is he capable post-resurrection? He will be less than 20 by the end of the series. Please say googly woogly. Happy to say googly woogly. In terms of will he have a child beyond the wall? No. At least we won't see it. So at the end of this, I agree that the last scene will be him heading off north beyond the wall. What happens to him then? I don't know. We're not going to be shown. Maybe he will. I like the idea that he will settle down and find some solace and a home and maybe somebody to love. And that would be great. Can he physically have children after coming back from the dead? We haven't been. We don't know. I don't think Beric could have children, but Jon's resurrection is going to be slightly different to Beric's because his body is almost certainly going to be effectively cryogenically frozen. It's going to go into the ice cells and it's going to freeze over. So that's not going to decay. His spirit, his soul, whatever we call it, he will go into ghost. So he is not going to, who he is, his essence is not going to decay in the same way that Lady Stoneheart's did or Beric's did. It will become more wolfish. This is one of the things Varamir has taught us, is that the longer that you stay in your after death, the longer you stay in your walking animal, the more you get subsumed within it. So expect Jon to become more wolfish and less human. Does that mean that he's not going to be able to have children? I don't think logically either of those things mean that he must no longer be able to have children. But I don't know. We simply have not been told the mechanism. This is something that George R. R. Martin is very vague, deliberately vague on. He doesn't want us to have all the nuts and bolts of exactly how the universe works in A Song of Ice and Fire. He wants us just to experience it and to have some wonder and not understand absolutely everything. Sabrina Temmie, how come Jon was allowed to take ghosts to the wall? Are they allowed pets, or is it because he was Ned Stark's bastard? Well, I think it's probably was because he was Ned Stark's bastard, is the honest answer. None of the others really, not certainly big pets like that, none of them bring them up. Fundamentally, this will be a decision which Gerald Mormont will have had to make, and clearly he will have taken advice from Benjen, and Benjen will have said, well, it seems well trained and it's not hurting anyone and it might prove useful. So yeah, why not? And I think once that decision had been taken at the top, then it was okay. The fact is, when he went to the Wall, he wasn't made to go. No one made him go there. He went there of his own volition. And so nobody could stop him bringing Ghost with him when he went up there. The issue was what happens after he becomes a member of the Night's Watch. Do they still want Ghost there? Well, Ghost immediately shows his worth. So by finding the hand of dead White Othor and then saving Lord Commander Mormont's life. So from that moment, then yeah, of course, Ghost is allowed to stay. Kelly Johnson, is the tragic character of Aerion Brightflame symbolic of the Targaryens' penchant for both greatness and madness? Well, yes, one of many. He's a character that we meet in the Dunk and Egg stories, and incidentally, he's George R. R. Martin did say he went over to Essos for a long time. Very probably had some bastard children over there. So there will be some distant relatives of Dany somewhere over in Essos, in Lys or wherever. And that's just, if you thought there is nobody else with Valyrian blood or Targaryen blood, there are. George R. R. Martin is very open about this, but that's not incidentally. Aerion Brightflame is one of many these charismatic characters that we get within the Targaryens. The two Daemons, Daemon Targaryen, Daemon Blackfire, both also have this within them, this greatness that can be both wonderful and terrible at the same time. The Rogue Prince, George R. R. Martin clearly loves the character of Daemon Targaryen. So this is one, I think Aerion's one of many that you could point at and say, yes, a bit of good, great, but also a bit of madness, and it's building up to help us frame what's happening with Dany. That doesn't mean she's going in any particular direction, but George R. R. Martin is clearly framing our understanding of what Targaryens are like. We've had Viserys, we've seen what he was like, then we've got Dany, and the question is, which way is she going to go? Reflective rambling. Andrew K would love to hear you attempt a Scottish accent. Various accent attempt, real Patreon extra perk. So Andrew, I'm sure you would love to hear me do a Scottish accent. It's not happening, I'm afraid. I would immediately lose any Scottish viewers. I do occasionally attempt accents on the Well Told Tale. If you would like to hear me do accents, there are some characters that don't work well with my natural accent, so I do put on a slight lilt elsewhere. But no, I'm not going to attempt that. And in terms of patron extra, maybe when I next do a charity live stream, if somebody's particularly generous, then you might get something out of me. But that's it. And John Martin just saying thanks, Robert. I suspect not for me saying no on the accent, but thank you, John. I hugely appreciate that. Where am I up to? Any more questions? I think I did. Just sort of scrolling through. I think I have another question. Apologies. So Misting, if he had a little more time before his death, could you see Robert Baratheon legitimizing any of his bastards for any reason? Well, yeah, I could, if he knew about them. What is noticeable again on my reread it, and it's great doing a reread because you just get to see the things you didn't see the first few times going through, particularly as I'm saying, I'm doing this as a re-listen and having somebody else read it to you. They're emphasizing things that perhaps you weren't spotting when you were doing the reading. One of the things that's come out is that Robert's deathbed, he's I mean, a changed character is probably too strong a way of saying it, but he suddenly seems nicer on his deathbed and has regrets and does seem to be trying to set right some of the things that he did wrong in the past. He's there with Ned and he's talking him through, and he said, I wasn't a good king. I wasn't a good father. He gets Ned. He says, Ned, promise you'll help Joffrey. He implicitly says Joffrey's not a good person. Ned, you make him a better human. He says, Daenerys, I shouldn't have ordered that person to go. I shouldn't have ordered her death. Can you try and get Varys to stop that? He seems to be going through this list of his regrets in life, and actually, because he knows that he's just got hours left, maybe he's just being a bit more realistic about who he is. Would that move on into him legitimizing any of his children? Legitimizing is a big thing. And so, I mean, if he legitimized anyone, it would probably be Edric Storm, who he did dote on a lot when he was younger. And that the problem there would be that he would be older than Joffrey. So if you legitimize a king's child who is older than the heir, that, yes, they might be slightly lower down technically in the pecking order, but you immediately create a rival. So I think he probably wouldn't, but no. So I don't think he would. I think that he made sure that the first couple that he had, he clearly cared for. The rest of them, he clearly didn't really care for. Carolina Clay, thank you so much for the super chat. Didn't see a question attached to that one. Maybe I'll just going down. After coming back from the dead, will Jon be human enough to have POV chapters, or will we see his story through other characters at the Wall? This is a thing which comes up a lot. That will we stop getting Jon POV chapters? I don't see why we should. I think he will still be Jon. Are there characters at the Wall that will allow us to see what happens with them? Well, we've got Melisandre is the only character at the moment. So it's possible if George R. R. Martin wants to do it that way, and it's noticeable that he's not ever said, I'm currently working on a Jon chapter. But that's probably because in his mind, Jon is dead, and he doesn't want to spoil it for anyone. If there is anyone who doesn't think that Jon's going to come back, he doesn't want to spoil it for them. So it's possible, but I personally can't see a literary reason why we wouldn't see inside Jon, or see things from Jon's POV going forward. In fact, what I would love, and maybe this is just because I really want to see it, I would love Jon in Ghost chapter. I've said it before. I think it'd be fantastic. An entire chapter of Jon in Ghost. What's he going to do when he arrives? His spirit has gone out to Ghost. It doesn't appear to be that was a deliberate thinking through. Well, what shall I do now? I'm being murdered. I should push my spirit over into Ghost. It was just an instinctive calling out to Ghost. Sebastian Holden, will Jon keep Longclaw, or will Jorah get it back? What sword will Jon have at the end? Maybe Dark Sister or Dawn? Please say Higa Herga. Happy to say Higa Herga. What sword will he end up with? I like the idea that he ends up with Dawn. Now, yes, he's not a member of House Dane or anything, but if we accept the possibility that Dawn is the original Lightbringer, and it is the only sword we know about that is old enough to possibly be the original Lightbringer, then it has to end up with an Azor Ahai type character, in my view. And the fact that Darkstar has it, that's not enough. His role is to be bringing it into the story. I wonder whether Jon will end up with Dawn, and what about Longclaw? Well, yes, I like the idea. It ends up with Jorah Mormont. I think that Jon will be not wanting to give it up, and you have to ask why he would give it to Jorah. It would be certainly a way into the story. I don't think it's going to happen in the Winds of Winter. He's not just going to say, this is Jorah Mormont's son. You have this sword. I don't think that's what's going to happen. The sword was given to Jon, so Jon believes it's his. Jorah gave it back. He's given it up. So this has to be a moment where Jon says, you've earned this back. And for that to happen, then he has to know Jorah. He has to know what Jorah has done. And that means that we have to be a goodly way through the story where Jon and Dany have got to know each other, and Jon has been able to see what Jorah has been about. I think, did I have one more question in the chat? Yes, I did. I can only find it. Mara Lee again. Mara, thank you. This is very kind of you. I have got some questions from you as well in Patreon, which I should get to in some moment. You're picking up something for Eminent Fox. Thank you. I love it when people do this. Thank you, Mara. Why was Benjen allowed to travel freely to Winterfell when King Robert and the party was visiting Winterfell in the first book? Well, the Night's Watch are free to travel anywhere. So they're allowed to go wherever they want to. The presumption is they stay at the Wall, but they do have a recruiter who sort of goes around. We have Yoren who does this, but we also know that this isn't just a new thing. There was one at the tourney at Harrenhal. We hear that there was a Night's Watch recruiter there. So having Night's Watch out and about is not that rare. The fact that the king came all the way to the north is worthy of the Night's Watch, given the fact that he's not going to go to the Wall. It's worthy of the Night's Watch sending a representative. Now, if they're going to send a representative, who are they going to send? Well, Jorah Mormont could have gone himself, or then you get the leaders of the three orders. Benjen was the first ranger, and obviously he had the link with Winterfell, so the idea is that he can go there and try and remind the king that the Night's Watch have been losing in power and influence and money and everything for decades. And if they can remind the king that they exist, then that is a good thing. So sending Benjen down there was a political move as much as anything else. Not so much, yes, it was Benjen is has ties to House Stark, but Benjen is very clear that he's now a member of the Night's Watch. Those are his brothers now, not Ned. So it's not just here's a chance for you to go and see your family. That's gone. Now he's there on a diplomatic mission. It's just that they know that he's got they can't pretend that he doesn't have those links with the Starks. Kelly Johnson, will Jon and Dany have a torrid love affair? Yes, in my view. Let's go back a couple more questions about Ramsay. Eric Ferg saying, do you believe Domeric Bolton was actually poisoned by Ramsay? Poison doesn't really seem like Ramsay's style. Ramsay's mother may have wanted to advance him. The original Reek may have been jealous of Domeric usurping his connection with Ramsay. Domeric also seems so different than Roose that perhaps Roose thought Domeric's real father was Brandon Stark or someone else. So this so Domeric Bolton was Roose Bolton's natural-born son. Now, sounds like he was quite a nice lad, really. He liked reading, he was quite reserved, and people seemed to quite like him. He was a very good horseman. He was fostered at Baratheon, he's done well. He was good and nice. And then at some point he heard that but he was an only child. At some point he heard that he had a half brother, Ramsay Snow. And so he goes out and tries to find this half brother because he's always wanted to have a brother. And Roose Bolton goes, no, this is not a good idea. Don't do this. But Domeric does it anyway. And he arrives there and then he dies shortly afterwards. Now, why? Apparently he just had some really bad tummy upset. The maester says it looked like it was poison. So it was the suggestion is, or what Roose says is he thinks that this was Ramsay killed him because Ramsay wanted to be the proper son of Roose and inherit. And that's what happened. Roose then did legitimize him or bring him in. And so it worked. The original Reek was this servant who did smell, who Roose had sent to Ramsay as this kind of looking after him thing that we've already talked about, that if you have a bastard child, you look after them. And it was almost a kind of like a half gift and half curse, because Reek he did smell a lot. He had some skin condition, but Ramsay seems to have made him incredibly loyal to him and actually turned this around. Now, who killed Domeric? We do not know. I agree it doesn't sound like Ramsay's style, but maybe he got Reek to do it. Either way, and George R. R. Martin doesn't tend to answer these things, he cares more about what happened afterwards. Either way, it did lead to Ramsay being brought into the Bolton household, and eventually to him being legitimized. Gavin saying, hi Robert, I wanted to thank you for these live streams, which have been helpful getting through my recent surgery recovery. Well, that makes me very happy to hear things like that. Thank you so much. And I'm very glad I could play a small part in your recovery. My question is, do we think Stannis will end up doing a lot more damage to Ramsay's forces than in the show? I'm assuming Stannis will still lose in the end, but I can't remember if you previously said you thought differently. Yeah, so this is the potential second battle, which we did see on the show, but they kind of like merged that and the Battle of Ice. Now, what happened there on the show was basically Stannis and his army kind of limped up to Winterfell, and then the Boltons came out, overran them completely. It was a blink and you miss it kind of battle, but at the end of it, Brienne was there and she saw Stannis, and that's the bit we remember. Do your duty. So that didn't even seem to dent the Boltons. Will they do more damage? Well, they'll get rid of the Freys in the first Battle of Ice, them and the Manderleys will. They may do a bit more damage. This is the bit that is slightly uncertain. Either Stannis will die in that second battle, or he will survive to the Battle of the Bastards and then die in that one, I think, because either way, Jon cannot be made King of the North while Stannis is around. That is an absolute no-no. Stannis would not allow that. Question from... let's start talking about Robert Baratheon's bastard children now. We talked about Jon, we talked about Ramsay, now we've got Robert Baratheon's children. Michael saying, love your Stannis voice. You're welcome. Abby saying, hi Robert, been looking forward to the stream. My favourite bastard is Mia Stone. I would love to see her again, although I somehow doubt we will. On an unrelated note, I recently read about the biblical Battle of Jericho. I realised George R. R. Martin's prophecy about the wall falling down is probably based on the priests bringing down the walls of Canaan by blowing ram's horns. So cool to see his inspiration in so many historical and mythical sources. Yeah, so this is the... just to take that briefly, this is one of the bigger clues that maybe the Horn of Winter does bring down the wall. I'm not 100% convinced it will. The one legend we have of when it was blown before, the wall didn't fall down, so I'm not 100% convinced at all. But definitely the walls of Jericho, for those who don't know it, then the people of Israel, this is back in Exodus, I don't know, something. So the people of Israel marched around the city of Jericho 7 times, then blew their horns, and then the walls came down. Very well defended city, but the horns were blown and the walls fell down. That is definitely a kind of an inspiration for this idea of the Horn of Winter being blown, and the wall falling. Kelly Johnson, why do non-Silverhead Targaryens never get the Iron Throne? Well, there aren't many of them. There are some. There aren't many of them. It just never happened. They never happened to be the one who was next in line. In terms of Mia Stone, Abby, I think that no, we probably won't. So she's the one in the Eyrie. She's the person who guides people up the Giant's Lance, which is a really tricky way to get to the Eyrie. You need to have somebody who can show people up and down, because it's incredibly hard to do. It also leads to one of my favorite Cat moments, because she is faced with Mia Stone and she knows who this is. This is Robert Baratheon's bastard child, and it prompts her to have this moment of regret about Jon. Which, I mean, it's just a fleeting glimpse, but it's there, and it's because she suddenly realizes she is faced with a bastard-born child, and who is just nice to her. And Mia Stone is nice all the way through. There's nothing, there's no ulterior motives there. She's just nice and cares, and it just, I think, made her realize what she had been like to Jon for just a moment. So it's just a flash and insight into the fact that Cat is not just this horrible person towards Jon. She was horrible to Jon, but she kind of realizes that she overreacted. John Kim, hi Robert. In the Cersei prophecy, the Woods Witch says that King Robert has 16 bastard children. Mia Stone, Gendry, Edric, and the baby who's murdered in brothel. Are others of the bastards mentioned, or is it part of A Song of Ice and Fire? Since Edric was born to a lady, does he have a claim to the Iron Throne? And Matthew Hawkins also says, hi Robert, do you think we will ever see or find out more details about Robert Baratheon's 9 unnamed bastards? So we know some of them. We know Edric Storm, Mia Stone, Gendry. There's also one more, Barra. So that's Barra's the child that Ned goes to see in King's Landing. There's another whose name escapes me at the moment, who's in Stony Sept. There are the 2 that Littlefinger talked about over in Castle Rock. The others we're not told about. We're not going to find out more about them. Those are the ones that Cersei Joffrey had killed. So we're not going to get more information about that. But what that does mean is that we've actually got a lot more bastard children out there than you might think. Whereas on the TV show, it really was, we've got Gendry. In the books, we've got 3, 4, 5 of them still hanging around somewhere. So there's a lot more that's that could happen there. Edric Storm was born to a lady. Does he have a claim to the Iron Throne? So this is quite interesting in that we have there are a couple of layers of bastards. If you are born of a noble and small folk, then you're called baseborn, which is like, so you don't really have any rights. Yes, you might be all of the good things, you might be recognized, looked after, but if you're the result of both of your parents being your biological parents being highborn, then you're sort of treated slightly differently, which leads Ned's treatment of Jon quite odd, because he never tells anyone who the mother is, so nobody quite knows where to pitch him. But yes, Edric Storm is indeed born from noble blood on both sides, and he is formally acknowledged, or was formally acknowledged by Robert Baratheon. So this does place him in a slightly stronger position. Maybe not for the Iron Throne itself, although yes, possibly, but certainly Storm's End. You get this, there's sort of passing references to if all of the immediate family have died, then yes, an acknowledged bastard child with highborn on both sides could have a claim, and it's really a matter of whether the lord next up or the king decides to accept it. Power resides where people decide it is, and the king is the person who is the most important. Does he have a claim? Yeah, he has a claim. Will it be recognized? That's a very different matter. Judges, Mike Hall, yes, post Moses, you're right. It's definitely, it wasn't Exodus, but yeah, Carl Karsnark saying post Moses is my new indie band name. Absolutely, yeah. So it's that bit about Jericho is when the people of Israel, having left Egypt, then are trying to claim the promised land. Sebastian Holden, will Doran, Arianne, Trystane survive? Could one of Oberyn's bastard children inherit Sunspear? Yeah, I'm going to get on to the Sand Snakes a little bit later, but I'll answer this quickly now. I think Doran's, he's probably going to go. If he survives, Doran has come down a lot in my estimations. The more I study him, I have to say, he loves to give the impression of this very clever and nuanced player of the game, but really I don't think he is. Anyway, Arianne I don't think will survive. She's going to tie her fate, I think, to Fagon. That was Dan shaking himself. And Trystane probably not, but I think the Sand Snakes probably will survive. So yes, I think that one of them probably will inherit the Martell crown. I think that's me caught up in the chat. Where am I at? So let's talk about Fagon briefly. Julie Bernard says, "Hi Robert, I'm a long-time fan since 2016. That one of the OGs. Thank you so much. It's hard. I've been doing this nearly 5 years now, or maybe more. I don't know, something along those lines. But yeah, that's thank you so much for your support over such a long time. I'm stretching the definition of a bastard with this question, since we don't know the origin of Fagon, but he might be a bastard. You've often mentioned that Fagon will want to surround himself with the trappings of a Targaryen court, and having the sword Blackfire from Illyria Mopatis would help. But since the sword was last seen with the Blackfires, wouldn't having it be evidence against his claim? Also, don't the Golden Company believe and support Fagon precisely because he's a Blackfire? How can he and John Connington keep up the pretense that he's Aegon Targaryen?" Good questions. I think there are good answers, though. The sword Blackfire, yes, it was taken by the Blackfires and kept by the Blackfires as part of the Blackfire rebellions, but it was never in any doubt that this was the ancestral sword of the Targaryen kings. That's not the issue. The issue is whether or not Daemon Blackfire, in being given it by Aegon IV, whether that was a symbol that Aegon IV was saying, this person should be king. That's the one issue of controversy. Nobody doubted that this was the ancestral sword of kings. So when it comes back, having disappeared, it's disappeared for 100 years or so. When it comes back, people will not look at it and say, that's Blackfire. That's where the Blackfire rebellion. Therefore, this guy must be a Blackfire. No, they're saying they will think this is the ancestral sword of the Targaryens, which was for a time taken by the Blackfires. That is the way that people will almost certainly see it. As for the Golden Company, yes. So the Golden Company were initially formed from Aegor Rivers, part of the Blackfire rebellions. These were the rebels in exile. That was their main purpose, just to be, yes, they would be fighting, being a sellsword company fighting in Essos, but the moment that there was another Blackfire rebellion, then we're on it, we'll be back Westeros before you know it. But generations have passed since then, and now, although yes, they retain that history, I don't think, from what we've seen from Harry Strickland and the like, that their main aim is still about the Blackfires. It's about getting back. I think a lot of them want to get back, but a lot of them are just general exiles from Westeros rather than Blackfire exiles. So we've got John Connington went and joined them, as we saw. He wasn't a Blackfire rebel. He was just a Westerosi person who happened to find himself in exile, and he's a fighter. What's he going to do? Well, he'll join the company of Westerosi sellswords. So the link is still there, but it's by no means as strong as it was before. So yes, this will be a thing where people will link the Golden Company with the Blackfires. Absolutely, there's no doubt about that. But this is why all of these other trappings of Targaryenness will need to start coming up. The sword Blackfire sitting on the Iron Throne, having a Kingsguard reminiscent of the last great Targaryen Kingsguard. These kinds of things. A crown, I'm sure they'll find one of the crowns. The Targaryen kings had several different crowns that they used. They'll find one of the crowns for him. Things which make him appear more Targaryen. Kelly Johnson, did Aerion deserve the beatdown Dunk gave him? Yeah, I think so. I mean, this is the Aerion was an absolute bully, and he was hurting and trying to claim a woman randomly. I mean, this is something that happened to the Targaryens with all their privilege, did it all the time. It was very few people. There were very few people who would stand up against it, and I think it says a lot about Dunk's character that he did. It's not just because it was somebody that he knew. I think he's just a genuinely nice person trying to protect people. Kelly Johnson, how good a swordsman was Shojon, since Carl Tanner was giving him the business before the Craster's daughter wife helped him? How good a swordsman was Shojon? I mean, I think we saw that he was good as a fighter. We're not told that he's one of the greatest swords people in the land, but he definitely was very good and very competent. He was trained in the castle in Winterfell, and he's certainly most people he fought, he had the better of. Let's talk about Sand Snakes. Knights who say sledge say howdy Robert and Dan. Dan sat back down from the Pacific Northwest. The Sand Snakes were terribly underserved by the TV show, as was Dawn in general, and they are magnificent bastards. What do you think George R. R. Martin has planned for them and for Dawn in general in the books? And Mara Lee, sorry, I'm just picking up on your super chat from much earlier, saying congratulations on getting 250,000 subscribers, and a show of love and appreciation for all the fabulous content, stories, and merch on both channels and website. Thank you very much, Mara. You were also saying, what role will Arianne Martell and the Sand Snakes play in the last two books? regarding Fagon's invasion, Dany's attempt to take the Iron Throne, and so on. Okay, so what's going to happen with the Sand Snakes? Lots is the short answer. So the Doran Martell is playing all of his games. His games, though, largely he sent Doran over to try and hook up with Dany. That didn't work. He's sending Arianne off to try and suss out what's going on with Fagon. And the Sand Snakes were involved effectively in an abortive coup attempt against him. He has now, having put them under house arrest, he's now released them and has sent them off on missions all over the place. So Obara, the oldest, has gone off to try and find Darkstar, who has gone rogue. So she's heading off. We will probably see her with Ario Hota, who is also headed off, and he's a POV character. We get 1 or 2 chapters from him most books, so that's where she's headed off, and that's how we're going to see the next bit of Darkstar story. Nymeria has been sent, Lady Nym has been sent to King's Landing to take the Dornish seat on the small council. Tyene has gone undercover with her so Tyene, her mother was a scepter, and so she understands a bit more about the Faith of the Seven than most people in Dorne do. She's been sent undercover to try and get into the good graces of the High Septon. So that they're all heading off into those two are heading off to King's Landing. The interesting thing is that there's this moment when they are in, I think, Sunspear, and Doran is coming up with all these great plots and plans, and there's this sort of peace offering made to them of the head, the skull of the Mountain, the person who killed Oberyn Martell, and then we get the envoy sort of trying to do a toast to the king, Joffrey, and all of the Sand Snakes, they react slightly differently, all of them, just sort of flicking, dismissing it, ignoring it, but they all very, very clearly hate the Lannisters, hate the people who killed their Elia, their aunt, and Elia's children, and also Oberyn. They are absolutely against it, and these are the people that Doran, he knows what they think. He is sending these people into King's Landing. He's setting them off of the leash, basically. So that's what's happening there. They will almost certainly get caught up in what's happening in King's Landing. Cersei is going to be taking revenge on the High Septon and also the Tyrells, who she's going to blame for the murder of Kevin Lannister. Now, whether it's exactly the same in the books, I don't know, but it would be something the equivalent of the firebombing, the wildfire on the Great Sept. If so, that's probably going to kill Tyene, as well as the High Septon, because she's going to be trying to get close to him. If so, that gives another reason for House Martell to be hating the Lannisters. So this is just going to be ramping it up even more. The Lady Nym Nymeria, she loves the poisons, and it really would not surprise me if there's an attempt to be killing one or more of the Lannisters while she is there. So there's a lot going on there. The others, Sorella is Aleros in Old Town. Ella has gone, so we're getting a lot younger now. She's gone with Arianne to try and meet Fagon. That is almost certainly going to lead to a new alliance between Fagon and Dorne and the Martells. The other three are Bella, Doria and Loreza. They're all still a bit too young to be involved. So the short version of this is that the Sand Snakes as a whole are going to be very busy. There's a huge amount of plot happening with Dawn. This is how Lightbringer probably, or Dawn as the sword Dawn, is going to be re-entering the story. Dawn itself as a place in the Martells will be actively against the Lannisters and actively in favour of Fagon. And that will mean by the end of the Winds of Winter, they're going to be in a relatively strong position. But then, because they've tied themselves in with Fagon, when Dany arrives with her dragons, that's when it's going to start going wrong for them. Abby, Irish Abby, tinfoil hat bastard theory. Dany is a bastard from Dragonstone. The Targaryen bastards often rode dragons better than the nobles. This could juxtapose with Jon being revealed as a true Targaryen. As you say, tinfoil, I mean, Jon is a true Targaryen. Dany, however, we know her origin story, we know her birth, we know how she was conceived, so she's not a bastard. She's the child of rape, but she's not a bastard. And Targaryen bastards often rode them dragons better than Targaryen nobles. I mean, I think that's debatable, but they sometimes did. The dragon seeds was clear evidence that you don't need to be pure Targaryen in order to be riding a dragon. Let's talk about Bloodraven quickly. Shannon I. Adams says, hey, Robert, haven't been able to post questions recently because of work, but still enjoy your content. When Bloodraven introduces himself to Bran, he speaks briefly about his past. In that conversation, he says he had a brother that he loved and a brother he hated. The first time I read this, I took it to mean that he loved Daemon and hated Bittersteel. I have since realised that the more common understanding is that he loved Daeron and hated Daemon. To whom do you think Bloodraven was referring? Well, this is... I mean, it's open for debate. But who he hated was almost certainly Bittersteel, Aegor Rivers. We're told this by a few different people. He clearly did hate him. That leaves open the question of who he loves, which was the brother he loved. Now, there are two possibilities here. The first is Daeron, who is his half-brother who became king. And he was ostensibly loyal to him all the way through. He fought civil war after civil war in defense of him as king. So that makes absolute sense that this was a brother he loved. But it would add an extra layer of tragedy if the brother he loved actually was Daemon Blackfyre, the half-brother. And he fought against him not because he didn't like him, but because he thought that was the thing that had to happen. The greater good thing about Bloodraven again was that he thought that he shouldn't be on the throne. So that we haven't got enough information yet to jump one way or the other. We may never get enough information, but of the two, you've got the plain text answer, which is it makes absolutely perfect sense, and then you've got the other one, which adds a layer of tragedy to his story, which I kind of like. So if I had to guess, I would probably say that he hated Bittersteel, but loved Daemon. And Nathan Hamming, how come Jon was originally given the surname Snow when Jon would have logically been born elsewhere, as the war was not in the north? So this is... Each region had a bastard name, and the bastard name was Snow for the north and Sand for Dawn and so on. Now, most of the time, this is, it's not an issue. It's only in which bastard name you give someone. It's only an issue if they seem to have been born in one place and then grew up in another. And in that, it seems to be the general practice. It's where they grow up. So it's not a surprise. It's just, if you want people to understand who someone is in the North, their role, then their surname's Snow. So that's what it is. It's as practicality as much as anything else. And so there's a lot. Well, the next level to this, and George R. Martin, I don't think he goes to this quite this level, but there's a lot less written stuff going on in that world than in ours. In ours, what your surname is matters a lot because it's on all your bank accounts and your passport or whatever. That didn't exist in Westeros. So it was simply a way of distinguishing between one person and another. And so in the North, how would they describe which John this was? It's Jon Snow, as opposed to what other John. So it was an oral tradition as much as anything else. Let's go on to some questions, sort of slightly connected to bastardy, but maybe slightly broader. Nenyon saying, "Hi Robert, House Baratheon was most likely started by a bastard. Do you think George R. R. Martin will do the same as the show did and have a bastard continue the house, or do you think House Baratheon will be extinct by the end of A Song of Ice and Fire?" I said I'd come back to this one. This is a question about Edric Storm, effectively. Of the bastards, Robert Baratheon's bastards who survive, I think Edric Storm is a much, much more understandable choice as being the new Lord of Storm's End for any ruler who wishes to do that. Dany on the show, when she made him ruler of Storm's End, yes, she made an ally, but where on earth does this come from? He has no, and even the character himself said to Arya, I mean, I've got no experience of what being a lord is. I don't know how to do it. The character in the books, Gendry, still doesn't even know that his father is Robert Baratheon. He's not got the foggiest idea. He's just a blacksmith. That's what he knows how to do. So it doesn't make huge amounts of logical sense. What with Edric Storm, he had been brought up in the courtly life. Both of his parents had been of lord level, and he was raised there and understood etiquette and understood politics and all of this. So it makes more sense. And it would not surprise me if he makes a return, and he could do. He's gone off. I think it's at least he's hiding out at. That's the route that Dany's going to be going on the way back. And so they may well pick up some people on the way back. Who knows? It's entirely possible that he could decide, this is my way back into power, particularly if he already knows that Robert Baratheon, his father, is dead, Renly Baratheon is dead, and Stannis has disappeared up north, and he may well be dead soon as well. So he may think he has a claim, and all he needs to do then is find a monarch, a ruler who will legitimize him. Johnny Giantsbane saying, "Greetings for the land of always winter. Myself and Jonesy Five Skins are enjoying summer life beyond the wall, and we're discussing tonight's topic earlier. Orain Waters is an interesting bastard who appears to have betrayed Cersei and stolen the fleet he was put in charge of during a Feast for Crows. Rumours are that he set up this in the Stepstones and may have done in the past as a pirate king. Given his House Velaryon roots and similar looks to Rhaegar, could he come back in the story on the side of Fagon or Dany, or still be keeping faith with Cersei?" Yeah, this is a book-only character. He's a really good character, and he was put in charge. He's a bastard, effectively, from House Velaryon, put in charge of the fleet under Cersei, and he's gone off with it. They don't know where. There's a rumor that there's a new king in the Stepstones. How will he then interact with the story? Well, if again we were talking about Dany's route to Westeros, she will have to pass through the stepstones. And at that point, Orain Waters, if he is establishing himself as a king there, he's either got to sort of hide away and let them go through and hope for the best, or he looks at what will be a hugely impressive army with 3 dragons, and think, you know what, I'm going to join this lot. So it's entirely possible that as Dany heads over, she's going to start gathering more and more allies along the way, and that's where he's next going to interact with the story, I suspect. Somebody going through the stepstones. The most likely next lot is going to be Dany. Mara Lee, one of my favourite quotes is when Tyrion meets Jon for the first time outside the hall where the banquet is being held at Winterfell. Tyrion is giving Jon some helpful advice, to which Jon asks Tyrion, "What do you know about being a bastard?" To which Tyrion replies, "All dwarves are bastards in their father's eyes." Do you think that after listening to Tyrion, Jon took this advice to heart? Do you think this advice was born from Tyrion's relationship to his father, and did it help Tyrion grow up? Yeah, so the advice, I mean, I agree, fantastic scene. One of my favourite scenes in all of the books, I have to say, that scene, opening scene between Jon and Tyrion, and the sort of the advice that he's giving Jon about, do not forget you're a bastard, no one else will. You take it and you use it as armor. That he seems to have taken for himself. That's what Tyrion has learned. And we see that is that people all the way through, they're poking fun at his height and his appearance. That doesn't seem to bother him. Genuinely doesn't seem to bother him. We see things from his point of view. That's not what hurts. There are things that hurt Tyrion. The things that hurt Tyrion are things to do with his family, with people that he loves. That's what really hurts Tyrion. Not when somebody says, "Oh, you're really short, ha ha ha." So he does seem to have internalized his own advice, and he gave it to Jon. And that all dwarves are bastards in their father's eyes. This was the start of, with Jon and Tyrion, for 4 or 5 chapters, George R. R. Martin went very, very strongly to make us see the link between the two of them, to see the similarities between the two of them. And they end, when they leave, shaking hands and calling each other friend. This is a bond which is important. The similarity between them is going to be important. It was established early on. It won't show how important it is until much later on, I suspect, probably A Dream of Spring, before we get Tyrion and Jon back in contact with one another. But that bond is going to be very important. 26 Arc Girl saying, "What do you think was the point George R. R. Martin was making about bastards?" I've got a few other questions from people along these lines, which I'll probably get to in a moment. But I think this is what I said we'd try and work our way up to. And what is it that George R. R. Martin... that bastards are an important part of this story. They are central to... I mean, Jon is obviously one of the central characters, and he's always being identified as a bastard. People are saying it to him all the time. Tyrion is saying, "I'm like being a bastard." He's another one of these central characters. And then we get all of these other bastards cropping up all over the place. What is it that George R. R. Martin is trying to show us? Well, as always, there are a few levels. The first level is just, this was what life was like. It's what life is like. Just because you're born with your parents weren't married, there are lots of people like that. This is just a thing that George R. R. Martin, if he's trying to create a real world, a real feeling world, then it's not all perfect, happy families all the time. There are children born out of wedlock. And some of them born out of wedlock very happily. Some of them born out of wedlock very unhappily. But this is him creating a good and grounded and well-rounded world. So that's the first level of what we've got going on here. The second... he is trying to, I think, subvert a trope, and I don't like talking about subverting tropes, because this was a thing that always people came back to this is what George R. R. Martin is, subverting fantasy tropes. He's not doing a huge amount of that, to be honest. But one thing that he is very clearly doing is setting up Jon to be this great action hero. If you go to any of half a dozen of the most best-selling fantasy stories, they've got the same-ish character in them. You've got this, pardon me, orphan child, a child of prophecy, never knew their parents, grew up in a castle. They're going to grow up to inherit the kingdom and defeat the big baddie and save the world. There are many other fantasy stories with that, and Jon is being set up to be that character. And so far, we're going down that route. But I think that George R. R. Martin verts away in a number of ways on Jon's sort of character arc, the classic fantasy hero character arc. One of the ways is that he's actually not a bastard. Everyone has been treating him as if he's one, but suddenly, actually, it turns out that he's not after all. That is one of the things. Another one is that he's not the hero. He might be a protagonist, but he's not the hero. He's the Frodo. He's not the Sam. He's not Aragorn. He's going to be somebody who does great, important things, but he's going to save the world, but not for himself. So there's a lot of layers that I think it's, and the top layer I talked a bit about before, but I think it's worth reiterating. George R. R. Martin has created a lot of characters who are bastards, and some of them are horrible, and some of them are really nice, and some of them are a bit of both. And that goes for the same for characters who aren't bastards. And it's not just that he's creating a character that can then be someone who can say, George R. R. Martin is trying to show us that bastards are actually okay. That's not where he's going. He's trying to show us that all humanity is the same. It doesn't matter who our parents are. It doesn't matter anything else along those lines. Humans are the same. Some of us are good, some of us are bad. Most of us are some sort of mix of grey, of good and bad. Maybe good intentions, but flawed realities. There is no difference. The society created a difference, but in real terms, there is no difference. And I think that is an important point George R. R. Martin is trying to make here with this emphasis here on bastards. Kanye Twitty, thank you so much for the thumbs up, the super chat. I appreciate that. Diego Godoy, hola. Of the important characters in the main A Song of Ice and Fire story, who do you think is more likely to be a bastard? Someone else besides Tyrion, thanks. I mean, I personally, I kind of hope we don't get any more twists like that, people not actually being who we think they are. And I think in line with what I was just saying, I think George R. R. Martin wants us to not care. I think he wants us to think it doesn't really matter, does it? Who's got what parentage? So there are lots of tinfoil theory. I love this thought that maybe Cersei is actually the Lannister who's secretly a Targaryen, because she has so many of the Mad King vibes. Jaime even says to her when she's standing there looking at the Tower of the Hand, which she's put wildfire in, and he looks at her and he says, "You're just like the Mad King right now." She is the one who has the most characteristics of him. The paranoid characteristics, the love of fire, the grasping for power. Not Tyrion. So, I mean, she's the character I would most love there to be some sort of a reveal that that's actually what her true parentage is. I don't think we're going to get that, though. George R. R. Martin is not going to give us this very clear line and say, these people are bastards, these people aren't bastards. And incidentally, on Cersei, having said I love that idea, she's probably not. But I think that George R. R. Martin is playing with it so that we can see that there's a possibility. Mike McFly, do you know how Westeros or Essos would look at a child who was born to two people who weren't married but together, and they ended up getting married after the child was born? Do you think they would be looked at as bad as bastards, the same, or like a regular person? So this bastardy is really, this is a Westerosi upper class issue. This isn't the same in most of the rest of the world. We get Missandei of Narth saying this isn't an issue for us over there. Similarly, a lot of the different cultures in Essos doesn't seem to be so much of an issue there. Certainly they care, those ones who care about tracing lineage back to Valyria, so in places like Volantis, then yes, whether you're of the old blood and things like that matter. But a lot of the time there are some places where it's not as important. Dawn is a very good example. Most in Westeros, most of the small folk, it's not so much of an issue. So yeah, I wouldn't, in terms of people who were together and ended up getting married after the child was born, I think most of the time it's not an issue. In Westeros, normally if that were looking like it was going to be the case, then there would be what we would now call a shotgun wedding. So I don't know, a crossbow wedding. Not entirely sure what they would call it in those days. Catherine in Fursith saying, "Hi Robert, the world in Ice and Fire is heavily medieval sort of society. In medieval times, bastards were many things. For example, was a bastard born from two highborn parents much higher valued by society than bastards from one highborn and one lowborn? Also, a classical literary motive has been the bastard as a villain. How do you think George R. R. Martin is trying to use the concept of bastards in his story? Is one aspect that they are as versatile as a group as any other? What else?" Yes, so I think I've answered this one already. So I've had a few Patreon comments. I'll read them out just because I think they're all underlining the same overall thought that we've got, that this is George R. R. Martin saying, it doesn't matter. Mark Adams, thank you so much for the super sticker. Sydney Rose saying, when Missandei in season 7 said there was no concept of bastards in Narth, I thought it was an interesting wrinkle to show how backwards Westeros minus Dawn is in comparison with the larger world. My question is, do you think that Martin's inclusion of bastards or broken things is a commentary on how laws, customs are fashioned by sovereign powers, often marginalized people in our civilized society? Or is he hinting that bastards and broken things, the outcasts, will be the ones to bring forth the dawn? Well, I think there's an element of both here. I think he is wanting us to see how the system as a whole in Westeros is broken and corrupt and wrong and bad. I think he wants us to see that. I think he also wants us to see the cripples, bastards, and broken things. And we often place too much. This was a throwaway comment by Tyrion. I don't think it's meant to be a great mission statement for the stories as a whole, but it's a useful bit of shorthand. Cripples, bastards, and broken things. George R. R. Martin links these people, and he wants us to see the people who've been done down by society, who've been broken by the wars, but destroyed by things that are beyond their control. Those are the people that he cares about the most in this story. He wants us to see them as having this second chance, as having the opportunity probably to build the new world afterwards. And we're not going to see all of this building the new world afterwards, but they are the ones who will inherit it. The George R. R. Martin talks a lot about the scouring the Shire and how bittersweet. He thinks of Frodo in particular with bittersweet about how he has been broken by the events of the Lord of the Rings. So this is something that he says this in admiringly and saying this is how his story is going to be. He sees the fact that people get broken by the story and yet survive as being really important and really central to his own understanding of what is worthwhile. Is that just because you're born into privilege that I don't think there's going to be many people who start being born into complete privilege and end up being in the same position. Even someone like, say, Sansa, who starts off in a position of great privilege and will probably end up in a position of great privilege, she has had to go through a huge amount, to the extent that she could even be considered, again, a sort of a broken thing, broken by the system. She's been used and abused by the system. So yeah, that's where George R. R. Martin is going with this. These are the real heroes. Henry White says, does Robb's will make Jon a Targ or a Stark? It makes him a Stark. As far as we understand, we haven't seen the writing. We don't know exactly what it says, but the conversations that he had before writing it were all about, okay, so both of my brothers are dead. Arya's missing, no one knows where. Sansa's married to a Lannister who's going to inherit Winterfell. The only option I've got is to legitimize Jon. That was the thinking. So almost certainly it legitimizes him. It legitimizes him as Ned Stark's son, and therefore as a Stark. So that is what it is. The Targaryen revelation will happen a bit later. Morally, in order to inherit a parent's seal of power and all the titles, monies, political clout, if one is a bastard, can they legally inherit, or do they have to become legitimized first? Are there any places in Westeros or Essos where one can be a bastard and still inherit? Yes, so on the latter point, Dawn, we talk about that a lot. This is the big exception. In terms of can they legally inherit? Yes, they can. As I say, it gets easier the further up this unacknowledged to acknowledged to legitimized rank you get. If you're legitimized, then of course, yes, you could definitely, because you're now part in the succession. If you're acknowledged and everyone else is gone, then you've got a reasonable claim. But it's a matter of who has the power. The king, the monarch, whoever will decide, and they will decide it based on their own reasons. And their own reasons are very, very rarely who is technically the next in line. Their own reasons will be, what can I get out of this? Who's going to be loyal to me? So whereas we often try and think about, the technicalities of lines of legitimacy and succession, that's not how rulers in this kind of world operate. They think about how do they gather and then maintain power. So it's not as simple a system as we might think. Andrew Kay saying, despite the Night's Watch vow seeming ironclad, Robb may legitimize Jon in his will. Stannis offers that as well, as it was to Aemon Targaryen. What is your take on how viable that option is? I think if there is a will, what I've been saying is that this is power. It depends on where the power is. If Robb Stark's will appears and says Jon is actually a Stark, then, and if everyone in the North suddenly says, yes, we agree, he's actually a Stark, he should be released from his Night's Watch vows, then it can happen. It just because there are some rules there, that doesn't mean that rules cannot be changed if the king decides it. The king is the person who gets to decide who goes to the wall, and theoretically could decide that they're going to be allowed to be released from their vows. So Aemon Targaryen was offered by some people as a slightly different example, but I think the link is still there. Aemon Targaryen, who became Maester Aemon, was offered by some people in the Great Council to become king. He'd already taken his Maester's vows, so the offer was basically the king would release him from his vows. The king can do this. The king can do whatever the king wants to do. So the fact that the Night's Watch vows are ironclad, not to a king. Lauren Mintz saying, 2 questions. Is Sir Maynard Plum from the Duncan Egg stories really Bloodraven in disguise? I noticed both characters use the phrase nest of adders when describing the events in Whitehall. White Walls. Pardon me. Even Dunk the Lunk is getting suspicious when he revealed that he knew everything going on at the tourney. Yes, I think almost certainly he is. If you reread it thinking this is Bloodraven, then the story makes so much more sense. When they first meet, he hears about a person who's been preaching something against the Targaryens, and then next up we hear that they've been strung up. We get the idea is that if this is Bloodraven, it's because he's cast a glamour on himself. A couple of times Dunk looks and he sees something hazy about him that only then slowly comes into focus later. At one point there's he looks and all he can see is one eye, and Bloodraven's only got one eye, and then he comes out from the dark and he realizes actually, oh, this is Maynard Plum. So yes, all the clues and hints are there that this is Maynard Plum is indeed Bloodraven. It's never spelt out, it's never said fully, but this is almost this is exactly what George R. Martin loves to do, is to give us something where all the clues are there, but he's never officially going to say that that's what it was that was going on. Secondly, you ask, is Daeron II, Egg's grandfather, the son of Aegon the Unworthy or Aemon the Dragon Knight? Because Bloodraven calls Egg his cousin. Well, so they're both sons of Aegon the Fourth. So Bloodraven being his a bastard child, and then Aemon being his great grandson. Does that make them cousins, or does it make him an uncle? Well, I mean, you go up one, across one, and then down three. I don't know exactly what that calls, but I think both, given the complicated nature of the Targaryen family tree, I mean, it's probably first cousin twice removed or something like that, but uncle works just as easily. Late Escapist saying, I think your pink letter theory is very well reasoned, thank you, but I hold to the belief that Ramsay wrote it. If you've not seen my video on that, my take is that this is a combination of Mance Rayder and Melisandre, mostly because of the excessive use of the word bastard and the fixation of Ramsay's own legitimacy. It's well established that Ramsay is very triggered by being called a bastard, even more so after being legitimized. The letter was signed Ramsey Bolton, Lord of the Holmwood, trueborn son of Roose Bolton, Warden of the North. I doubt that's a detail many people beside Ramsay would have cared enough to include. Also, the details about the Night's Watch and the Wildlings don't strike me as completely out of character for a northern lordling. Northerners have always been more concerned with the Wildlings and the Watch than other Westerosi. Could this be Ramsay? Well, I think this gets to sort of the heart of how I approach these things. Could it be Ramsay who wrote it? It could. It could. I personally think that the balance of the evidence is that it's not Ramsay. I'll get onto that in just one moment. But I think that the way that I try and present all of this is not, this is my cast iron theory, that's where I stand, right or wrong, and then I'll find out later whether I'm right or wrong. What I try and do is I try and present the evidence and say, on the basis of what we've got at the moment, I think this is the most likely. But other things could be true. In this, I think the most likely solution is what I said. I'm not going to go through all of the detail of it, but I think it was written by Mance Rayder as part of a plot with Melisandre in order to goad Jon into attacking Winterfell. Now, why do I think that? Well, this seems to be logically, in terms of character, this is what Melisandre wants. Why else was she sending him down there? There are a whole host of smaller clues with, for example, the pink, it's sealed by a smudge of pink wax. No suggestion of a seal, which Ramsay would have done. We're told many times, we've seen 2 or 3 of his letters before. They all seem to be in a particular style, threatening, but with gruesome things like bits of skin or written in blood. This doesn't have any of that, so it doesn't seem to be his style. And it's written... yes, there are some linguistic things in there that I think seem to imply it's written by somebody who spent most of their time north of the Wall. But I think the bigger point is that half of the letter is about Mance Rayder and in other people connected to Mance Rayder that Ramsay wouldn't have any interest in or care about. What does he care for Mance Rayder's wildling princess? That doesn't bother him in the slightest. Why even would he want to be goading Jon down into attacking Winterfell? There's absolutely no... if he's, as he says, there having won a battle with Stannis, he's very happy there. He can wait him out. He can stay there all the way through winter. It's not an issue or problem at all. So for me, it's those kind of slightly higher levels that do not work. It doesn't feel like a Ramsay letter. The motivations don't work. However, we've got another explanation which makes even more sense. So that's where I'm at on it. But that doesn't mean that Ramsay didn't write it. I just don't think he did. But if it turns out in the Winds of Winter that we get very clear that this was written by Ramsay, then okay, we've got new evidence. That then we change our understanding of what happened. But this is what I try and do in this channel, is not say this is an absolute theory, right or wrong. I have to stick by it. If we get more evidence, then we will shift our understanding of what's going on in the story. Nathan Hamming, in the show when Bran finds out Jon was not Ned's bastard and was born in Dorne, he says his surname should be Sand if it's based off where you were born. It shouldn't have been Snow if he was Ned's bastard anyway then. Yeah, we covered this a moment ago, but this is I think this was trying to get through this idea of, first of all, he should already have known that it was Sand Dawn. Nobody thinks that Jon Snow was born in the north. That's not a thing at all. This is Ned arrived from the south with a child. Nobody thinks that Jon was born in the north. He was given the surname Snow because that's what northern bastard children are called, and Ned just didn't really say. He didn't let anyone talk about it. So what are you going to say? You're going to call it Snow? Of course you are. That's just the name. So that, however, was sort of a leading thing into but he wasn't a bastard. He was actually a Targaryen. So that was a sort of a two-step thing that they were trying to show, I think, in the show. First of all, so Jon wasn't from the north. He was actually from the south. He wasn't illegitimate. He was trueborn. So that I think was what they were trying to do. I don't think that worked particularly well, but that's what they were doing. Okay, so that I've got one more question from my patrons. So if you've got more questions in the then now is the time to drop them into the chat. Yeah, I see Reflective Andrew K talking about the slow speed. I set it to 25 seconds between comments now in the chat this time round. If you're still watching this deep in, then perhaps you care about this level of detail. That seems to be working, but moderators, do let me know if you think that's still going too fast or too slow, particularly with a view to if we have the same thing we had a couple of weeks ago, whether that would work. But the other question I have from this is completely unrelated to bastards, but Sir Bunk the Lunk says, "Hi Robert, if you were a Westerosi knight, would you rather own a Valyrian steel bastard sword or a suit of Valyrian steel armor?" I think I would go with the armor every time. Part of me, because it'd be far more valuable and I could sell it off and buy myself a nice castle and I don't have to worry about anything from then on. It'd be far rarer and far more valuable. But assuming I want to keep it, yeah, we've not seen a Valyrian steel armor in combat yet. Euron seems to be wearing them in the Forsaken pre-release chapter from the Winds of Winter. But a sword, a Valyrian steel sword is good for fighting, and it will get you through lots of different, it will kill the others and all the rest of it. But Valyrian steel armor should protect you from almost anything. If you had a very good sword in Valyrian steel armor, I think it would be better than having Valyrian steel sword and very good armor. It's just my take. The big thing with armor is quite how heavy it is. If you've ever tried on wearing a plate armor, it is incredibly heavy, and it makes it really hard to move around. The thing about Valyrian steel is it is lighter, and so yes, that's a slight advantage. When you've got a sword, you can be slightly more maneuverable about it, but it would be a huge advantage if you're wearing lighter armor and you can move around a lot more, and you won't tire quite as easily. Tiring wearing armor is a thing that George R. R. Martin does show us and talk about quite a lot. If you think about that first battle that we see Bronn in with Sir Vardis, that's all about Bronn just getting the other guy tired because he was wearing lots of full plate armor, and so he just sort of danced around him until he got too tired. That was a legitimate tactic. So yes, Valyrian steel armor would be better. Chaos Ballerina, is Nettles actually a dragon seed? We don't know. Everything that it's just her complexion. We're told that she has dark skin. That makes us think that she might not be. She does bond with a dragon, but she does it not by sort of like just going up and immediately having some connection with the dragon. This is done over a long period of time. Sheep Stealer was the dragon, and she would bring a sheep every day, and then after a very long time she would be moving closer and closer to the dragon, giving it sheep, and it was just like training, how to train your dragon. This is what she's doing. So she is forming a natural bond. So it could be either. We're not going to know either way around. It could be either. My personal feel is that she's probably got some Valyrian heritage in there somewhere, but it's only quite small. As we've said before, Dany is only about 1/8 Targaryen, so it doesn't have to be 100% Valyrian heritage. Nettles is probably falling somewhere in that group of people who've got a small bit of Valyrian heritage. Smith Crazy, thanks as always for hanging in there, enjoying the long chats. In the books, have children born out of wedlock from female monarchs been given the same surname system as those from the males? So there have been in Westeros, I'm trying to work out how to say this. There have been no female monarchs, certainly in the Targaryen era. When I say I have to figure out how to say this, there have been. There absolutely have been, but in history books, then they're not. Rhaenyra sat on the throne for 6 months. Visenya Rhaenys also, when Aegon wasn't around, which was most of the time, we're told, more than 6 months a year, he wasn't there. They ruled from the Iron Throne, and they were in charge. We get Alicent Targaryen was effectively a co-ruler, but of these, because their marriage was important, the children that they had, regardless of whether they were legitimate or illegitimate, they claimed legitimacy. So whereas male monarchs happily spread their genes right across the nations, the female monarchs, leaders, rulers that we have, if they did so, they pretended not. Okay, I think let me just have a quick flick through where we're at in the chat. Reflective Rambling saying, speaking of Dragonseed, etc. Well, I'm not for Tyrion. I will accept that Tywin or Joanna have dragon blood in them, known or not, admitted or unknown. Okay, that's an interesting extra thing. Alicia Kingston, goodbye. Great to have you in the chat and being a mod. Emin Fox, the show is not canon. Absolutely not. Question about Bravos. Could someone illegitimate, this is Reflective Rambling, could someone illegitimate be a key keeper in the Iron Bank as it's an inherited position or mark of being descended from an originator? Yeah, we're not told so much about Bravos. You get the impression that it's quite a sort of segmented society, but it's based on a lot more egalitarianism. What they have there is also a lot more sort of Florence Venice kind of feel to it, with courtesans which have a different level. So whereas in Westeros, if you had a mistress, then most of the time it was sort of slightly hidden, you weren't really sort of talking about it. This is an elevated part of society if you're a courtesan, and if you have a child as a courtesan, then your child also retains a high level within society. So there is more openness and egalitarianism within Bravos than there is within the Seven Kingdoms. Andrew Kay saying, with Edric Storm being locally adored quite a bit, he could be a very useful political tool. Perhaps Varys brought him in the fold to help Fagon take Storm's End. Yeah, that's another option. So how did Fagon take Storm's End? We're told in the pre-release chapters from Winds of Winter that he has. This is an option. Varys will know where Edric Storm is, and he could bring him in. And if he then sides with Fagon, Fagon will have to decide who to give Storm's End to. And he might, if he's got Edric Storm, then that is a ready-made solution, because as you say, Edric Storm is known and well liked there. Peter Rowan, how would one defend themselves against someone in Valyrian steel armor attacking you with a pointed stick? Yeah, Valyrian steel armor and a pointed stick would work very well. And I think with that, Carolina Clay saying, please talk about Sansa's bastard character as Elaine. Yes, so she's hiding in the area or the Vale now as Littlefinger's bastard child, Elaine. Now, this is giving her, Littlefinger is using this as an opportunity for him to be playing political games, because he's effectively the Lord Protector, Lord Regent there, and so his only known child, this bastard child, who is acknowledged by him, she is also clearly well trained in etiquette, and she's clearly beautiful. She is quite a useful pawn for him to play, and this is where Harry the Heir comes in. This is Littlefinger and Sansa. Sansa's learning how to play this game too, figuring out how to make political alliances, and so expect to see Littlefinger trying to use Sansa. I don't think he's going to hand her over. George R. R. Martin is very clear that his Littlefinger would not hand Sansa over to Ramsay, for example. I don't think he's going to hand her over to anyone he thinks will hurt her, because he's got that, I was going to say slightly weird, very weird attachment to her. But he is going to use her as a political pawn there. The thing I like, and George R. Martin loves wordplay, and perhaps you can think of other things along these lines where George R. Martin's wordplay comes in. I love the fact that if you take the main alter ego that Arya has had pre-Mercy in Braavos as Cat of the Canals, and then you take Sansa's main alter ego being Elaine, then you have Cat Elaine, Catelyn, and that works wonderfully for me. That I'm convinced that was George R. R. Martin doing it deliberately just to show us that these are Catelyn's children still, despite whatever aliases they may be going under. Okay, so with that, I think I'm going to start drawing this this to a close. If you are watching this back later, then you will find appearing somewhere around here will be a link to other live streams. Appearing somewhere around here will be a link to my Patreon if you want to support this channel, or as I say, I said earlier about the pre-release chapters from the Winds of Winter. If you want to get access to them, my audio narrations of them, they will be here-ish. Okay, that's all for this time. I got this subject incidentally. I think it was Epistemic. So thank you so much. I saw it in the comments below the last video. If you've got any thoughts for what the next video subject could be, then drop them down in the comments below this video. I will check through them, see if anything sort of takes my fancy. But okay, take care, everyone. I will see you again same time next week.